Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku and Jirou Fell in Love. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was a Thursday morning, and Class 1A was sitting around waiting for homeroom to start. Ida was telling everyone to settle down. Tokoyami was sitting on his desk, and Uraraka was chatting with Shinso in her usual bubbly manner. The class seemed normal, and the day appeared to be as ordinary as any other at UA. However, Momo was concerned. Her friend hadn't shown up yet, and homeroom was about to start. "Has anyone seen Jirou?" Momo asked, worry etched on her face. "Now that you mention it, she hasn't shown up yet," Kaminari observed. "Well, she better show up soon," Ida told the class. "Homeroom will start very soon." As if on cue, Jir burst through the door, breathing. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair was a mess, and she was wearing mismatched socks. "Jirou, your tardiness is unbecoming of a UA student," Ida exclaimed, quickly reprimanding her. Jirou winced at the sudden noise and glared at him. The class immediately realized Ida's mistake. Jirou was known for her fierce attitude, making her someone you wouldn't want to boss around. They braced themselves for her usual retort, but to their surprise, Jirou bowed her head. "Sorry, Ida, I was caught up with chores at home," she said. The class froze. Jirou never apologized. I see," Ida stammered. "Well, you're not late for homeroom, so I guess I can let this slide." "Thanks, Rep," Jirou said with a smile that shocked the whole class. Jirou never smiled. The closest she got was a confident smirk. She skipped over to her desk, placed her bag down, and sat, swinging her legs happily. The class was honestly terrified. What had happened to Jirou? More importantly, what had put her in such a good mood? The class slowly followed her example and sat down, still staring at her. The door slid open, and Aizawa entered the classroom. "All right, everyone shut up and get to your..." He was cut off by the sight of the class sitting in silence, attentively. "Well, that's new," he muttered to himself while making his way up to the podium. After class ended, and 1A was preparing to leave for lunch, Mina approached Jirou. "Hey, Jirou, what's gotten you in a good mood?" she asked. "Oh, nothing much," Jirou exclaimed with a smile, once again startling the class. "Just had a good morning, that's all." Mina was about to respond when Jirou's phone went off. Jirou quickly pulled it out, and Mina peered over her shoulder. Mina's eyes widened as she saw a green heart next to a name and squealed in delight. Jirou quickly covered her phone, wide-eyed. I need to take this," she stammered, running out of the classroom with Ida shouting after her for running in the halls, disappearing around the corner. Mina wore a mischievous grin, which didn't go unnoticed by Hagakure. "What's with the face, Mina?" she asked curiously. Mina's grin widened. "I know why Jirou's in such a good mood," she revealed in a teasing tone. The class immediately gathered around her in interest, even Todoroki and Bakugo. "Why?" the class yelled, eager to know the reason behind Jirou's attitude. "It's quite simple, you see," Mina began, drawing the class in with suspense. "She has a boyfriend." Jirou stood in a secluded hallway, panicking. Did Mina see? She thought, holding her phone to her chest. "No, definitely not. I covered the name before she could see, and even then that name could be interpreted as anything." She looked at her phone and quickly returned the missed call. Ring, 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 ring. She held her breath, hoping he was still near his phone. "Ring RIH, hello." "Oh, thank God, Aizu," she exclaimed, relaxing her tense shoulders. "Sorry for calling you during school hours, Keikyo," Aizu stammered. "And no, it's fine," she reassured him. "You know how much I love talking with you," she added, blushing at her own words. "Oh," Aizu replied, and she could practically feel the heat rising in his cheeks. "Well, in that case, I should do it more often." "I agree," she said, giggling. "So, what did you want to talk about?" she asked anxiously. Oh, I was just wondering if you want to hang out after school today?" he asked in his usual innocent tone. "I swear this boy will be the death of me," she thought, tilting her head back against the wall. "I'd love to, Aizu," she said, smiling. They had just finished their internships, and Isa understood why they couldn't hang out during those days, but that didn't stop him from disliking it. "Ah, really?" he exclaimed excitedly. "Great. I'll meet you at the park." Her heart melted at his enthusiasm. He was like a happy puppy, and she was his favorite chew toy. "Great, I'll see you there, Greenie," she said with a smile. "Yup," he replied happily. "Have fun with the rest of your school day, Violet." If her heart was melting before, now it was boiling. She loved his little nickname for her, and hearing it in his adorable voice made her want to roll around on the floor and squeal like a little girl. I will," she said with a blushing stutter, hanging up the phone and making her way to the cafeteria. The class was interrogating Mina about her findings. "Are you as sure, Ishido?" Momo asked. Wow, who knew the prestigious Yamamo was not above partaking in gossip? Mina said with a smirk, causing Momo to become incredibly flustered. It's not like that, Ishido," Momo stammered defensively. "I'm just concerned about Jirou." Well, if you want to know, Yamamo, I saw the person calling her have a green heart next to the nickname Izu," Mina said, smirking at the effect she had on Momo. "It would explain her happy attitude," Shoji added, intrigued by the gossip. "I don't think it's true," Kaminari stated with a scowl. "If Jirou really did have a boyfriend, she would have told me, or at the very least, I would have known." "Before Yamamo?" Mina questioned. "I doubt it. How about we ask her about it before we go home?" Ojiro suggested. "Nah, she wouldn't tell us even if she did," Mina said, dismissing the idea. "Who cares who Earphones is dating?" Bakugo scoffed, rapidly losing interest in the gossip. "Bakugo language," Ida reprimanded, waving his arm in its usual manner. "Shut it, Four Eyes." Bakugo replied, scowling. "Let's just ask her later," Sato suggested, agreeing with Ojiro. The class hummed in agreement, minus Mina. "I'm telling you it won't work," Mina muttered as they left for lunch. It was the end of the day, and I was rushing to put my stuff in my bag. I was over the moon about the exam needed to go to summer camp. Many would call me crazy for this, but I couldn't wait to spend time with Isa studying. "Hey Jirou." Momo called to me. "Yeah," I replied, smiling. "I'm starting a study group with the class for the upcoming exam," she explained. "Will you be joining us?" "Our first session is today." My heart sank. I didn't want to make this decision between my adorable Greenie and my best friend. Intelligence-wise, Izu was not as good as Yamamo and didn't know the curriculum as well as she did. But Izu was aiming to be a teacher, so he would be very good at helping me. Plus, there was the fact that I adored his company. It was a hard decision and one I despised, but in the end, I barely had any time to spend with Izu. "Sorry, Yamamo," I said with a sad smile. "I already have a friend I want to study with. I'm meeting with him today, actually." "Oh, of course," Yamamo stammered. "Don't worry, I understand," she said with a disappointed face that added to my guilt. "I know it's selfish, but sue me for having feelings," I thought to myself. "Who are you meeting?" "With Jirou?" Mina said, intruding on my guilty conscience. "Maybe a boyfriend?" As she said this, she got closer and sang the word, boyfriend. My face flared up. Did they know? I thought I was discreet. What are you talking about? I screamed, flustered beyond belief. I then grabbed my bag and bolted out of the classroom. I smirked at Jirou's reaction. She was an open book. "Well, that confirms it," I said to the class. "I take it back, Ojiro and Shoji, asking her was the right move." The class stared in disbelief. I was happy about my successful detective skills. However, I wanted to find out who the boyfriend was. "Now that phase 1 is complete," I declared triumphantly, "we move on to phase 2 and follow her." "Ishido, that is a breach of privacy, and as class rep, I cannot condone this," Ida said. "Yeah, not a very manly thing to do, Ishido," Kirishima said, shaking his head. "I wanna go," said Kaminari with a determined look on his face. "Ooh, someone's got a crush on Jirou," I noted to myself. "I second this," Yamamo said, surprisingly. "I want to find out if Jirou's partner is trustworthy." In the end, it was me, Yamamo, Kaminari, Kirishima, Hagakure, Ochako, Ojiro, Sato, Shinso, Bakugo, surprisingly, and Ida, but only so he could supervise us. I quickly ran out the gate and sighed with relief when I found them not chasing me. Damn it, I basically confirmed Ishido's suspicions now, I thought to myself, shaking the negative feelings from my head, just like Izu told me. I made my way to the park without even bothering to change. God, I'm desperate to see him, aren't I? I muttered to myself before going through the gates. I scanned around for the adorable cinnamon roll and found him smiling, looking up at the trees. The light danced with his appealing green hair, and the leaves in the background only made it more stunning. He was wearing one of his iconic t-shirts and had a bracelet with the bisexual flag colors on it. He had also painted his nails black and was wearing dark blue jeans. He was sitting on a blanket, leaning against the tree while looking at the sparrows nesting on the branch above him. Next to him was a bag with what I assumed was food for us to share. You, Izu, and your thoughtfulness, I thought to myself as I made my way over to him. He hadn't noticed me as I was behind him, so I decided to surprise him and hug him from behind. I slid my arms around his stomach and pulled him to me, placing my forehead at the back of his neck. I felt him jolt at the sudden touch but relax once he felt my earphone jack caress his cheek. He turned to me with concern. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Did something bad happen at school?" I tensed up at the word, school, hoping he wouldn't notice. However, I knew he did as he stood up and got behind me, swapping positions with him hugging me. The only difference was that his head was resting on my shoulder instead of my neck. "What happened?" he asked in a delicate tone. "I think my class found out about us," I said in a small voice, worrying about how he'd react. He stuttered, his calm demeanor shattered. I winced at his response. I was hoping he wouldn't care too much, but we both knew why he didn't want the class knowing, and it was for good reason. "I'm sorry," I said in a fragile voice. "I was in a really happy mood because of our time together yesterday, and when you called, I think Ishido saw your name and asked if I had a boyfriend, and I panicked and—" he said, stroking my hair to soothe me. I looked up at him, tears threatening to fall. "Why, you're not mad?" I asked timidly. "Of course I'm not, Kyo," he said in a calm voice. "You did nothing wrong. If anything, I was the reason they found out." He kissed me on the cheek, causing me to flush red. "I'm sorry for overreacting, Violet," he said apologetically. "And oh, it's fine," I stuttered. "I'm just happy to spend some time with you." I wiped away my tears and looked at him. "Me too," he said, pulling me closer. I relaxed into his embrace and sighed in satisfaction. "So, other than our exposure," Izu started, "what else happened today?" I sat up and smiled at him. "Well, there's a summer camp coming up and I need to revise for an exam to go," I said with an upbeat attitude. "You seem excited about this," Izu questioned, puzzled. "You hate any schoolwork other than heroics." "True," I agreed with a smirk, "but I happen to know an adorable green cinnamon roll who is amazing at teaching." I looked at him with puppy dog eyes, his one and only weakness. "What about one of your classmates?" he asked, still puzzled. "I find it hard to believe all of them are studying alone." My heart sank. This boy was too intelligent for his own good. "Why yeah, but I got you, so I thought I wouldn't need to bother them," I argued. "Kyo," he started. "Please, Izu," I begged. "I'm going to be away at the summer camp for a week, and I want to spend as much time with you as possible." Izu sighed and nodded his head. "Fine," he said begrudgingly. "Yes," I exclaimed and quickly peppered his face with kisses to show my gratitude. "Kyo," he exclaimed, giggling at my antics. He then held my face to stop my onslaught. "I'm happy too, Kyo," he said with a smile. "But don't expect it to be only couple stuff, we will be working hard for this." "I know," I said happily, wrapping my arms around his neck. "I'm just glad I get to spend time with my adorable little broccoli." "And me with my appealing lavender," he replied. I moved my face forward, ready to close the gap between us, but we heard a rustle in the bushes behind us. I opened my eyes and looked over Izu's shoulder, freezing as I saw my classmates tumble out of the bushes. They froze and slowly looked up, meeting my eyes. Ichie, who, one of them stammered. In the end, our super-secret spy group had me, Yamamoto, Kaminari, Shinso, Uraraka, Kirishima, Bakugo, surprisingly, and Ida, who was tagging along to supervise us. "Okay, squad, let's move out," I said, bursting with excitement. We were already far behind Jirou, so we rushed out the gates to find her. I scanned the streets for a purple-haired rocker. I thought it would be easy to spot. However, in a society where everyone sticks out, it felt like looking for a needle in a haystack. "Ugh, this is impossible," I screamed in frustration. It had been 20 minutes, and there was no Jirou in sight. Our first super-secret spy mission had gone up in flames. "Okay guys, let's go ho." And oh way. I whipped my head around to the blonde, who was staring at a boy. The boy had black nails, jeans, a pink t-shirt with a black underlayer, and a bracelet with the bisexual colors. However, his hair was what caught my eye the most. It was green, the same color as the heart next to Iza's name. It was a stretch, but one I was willing to take for the sake of romantic drama. "Good eye, Bakugo," I exclaimed, jumping up and down, holding onto his shoulders. Bakugo pushed my hands off but made no aggressive comment afterward, which was odd. "I don't get it, what are we looking at?" Shinso asked, rubbing his eyes, with Uraraka nodding in agreement. "No time to explain," I exclaimed, running after the green-haired boy, while Ida shouted after me. He was a good way away, and from the looks of things, he was heading into the park. I noted to myself that Bakugo was right as I started to enter the park, my classmates in tow. The guy looked my age and had a strange mix of timidness and maturity in his posture. I doubted that he was bad news for Jirou. My hunch was right, but I had to make sure. Eventually, he stopped under a tree and placed a blanket. Blanket? Well, he's probably waiting for someone, and the park is a pretty good romantic setting, I thought to myself while moving to hide behind a bush. Eventually, the rest of the group caught up, and I signaled them to come to the bush. "So what are we doing?" Yamamoto asked, nervously crouching behind the bush with us. "Call it a hunch, but I think this might be Jirou's boyfriend," I whispered to them, eyeing the green-haired boy intensely. He doesn't look like much," Kaminari sneered with clear disapproval. "What's up with you, bro?" Kirishima questioned with a raised eyebrow. Kaminari was about to respond, but I immediately clamped my hand around his mouth when I saw our purple rocker start to enter the park. She made her way to our target and sat behind him, latching onto him like a koala and placing her forehead against his neck. I was over the moon that my hunch had paid off. Yamamoto eyed the boy suspiciously, Ida sat up straight, Shinso and Uraraka nodded in approval, Kaminari seemed agitated, Kirishima let a single tear drop while whispering manly, and Bakugo clenched his jaw, his hands making slight pops and cracks. Bakugo's reaction confused me. I knew why Kaminari was unhappy, but why was Bakugo? Did he secretly like Jirou? "Deku," Bakugo said as if it were a slur. Was that his name? I didn't bother to ask Bakugo out of fear of him blowing our cover. They started to talk about the day, with Deku and Jirou switching positions, and Deku consoling Jirou. I felt bad that Jirou was worried about us knowing, but I found it strange how Deku stuttered and seemed upset. What was even weirder was how Jirou was acting. She seemed so fragile, like Deku was her last line of support. Eventually, Deku got over it and talked to her about tutoring. It turned out Jirou hadn't asked him to tutor her beforehand. Yamamoto was a bit hurt when she found out that Jirou hadn't asked Deku to study and still chose him over her. However, after they talked about the tutoring, Kaminari seemed to be shaking a little violently. "Hey Kaminari. Bro, you okay?" Kirishima asked with a look of worry. I looked with concern and quickly turned back to the couple, just as they were about to kiss. Sparks started flying out of Kaminari's hands. Suddenly, Kaminari's sparks hit us, causing us to yelp and jump forward out of the bush. We all slowly looked up to see Jirou and her boyfriend sitting rigid, staring at us in shock. "Icheu," I stuttered out with a weak smile. To say Jirou hated this scenario would be an understatement. Right in front of her were her classmates, all placed atop one another, staring at her and Midoriya. This was the one thing she wanted to avoid. Her boyfriend was the one part of her life that was all hers, and now most of her class had found out about him. Jirou turned around to see how Midoriya was reacting, checking if he was alright. However, he looked like the definition of the opposite. His eyes were wide, with tears threatening to fall. He was shaking, his breath heavy and uneven, and his facial expressions red shock and fear. "Oh my god. Izu, are you okay?" she asked, panicking at her boyfriend's shaken demeanor. "Kekidid," he stuttered, staring directly past Jirou. Jirou followed his line of sight and froze at what she found. Right in front of her was Bakugo, seething with anger. His bloodlust filled the atmosphere, and he looked so furious that it felt like he could explode. "Deku!" Bakugo spat, venom dripping from his words. The poor green-haired boy's breathing became more erratic, and he started to shake more heavily. "Are you okay, bro?" Kirishima asked, trying to move out from underneath Mina. "Izu," Jirou said, looking at her boyfriend with concern. She reached for his arm to reassure him, but the moment she made contact, he yelped and slapped her hand away with great force. Jirou held her hand, hurt and emotional. Tears started to fall from Midoriya's face. "I'm so sorry," he stammered before scrambling to his feet and running. "Izu!" Jirou cried out, begging for him to return. Jirou turned around to the wide-eyed group and glared at them with enough intensity to suffocate the world. "When I see you back at the dorms, you better pray that Mr. Aizawa or All Might are there. For your sake," she spat, directing her anger at everyone in the group. She glared at Bakugo one more time before running after her boyfriend, hoping he hadn't gone far. It didn't take long for Jirou to find him, as she knew he wasn't the most athletic person. In fact, he was very skinny, and Jirou had worried about his health many times. He was still in the park, curled up against a tree farthest from all the other people. "Izu," Jirou said, her voice filled with concern and love. Midoriya slowly lifted his head, revealing a face that almost shattered Jirou's heart. His wrists were marked with scratches, and his clothes were caked with mud. His once proud bracelet was now stretched and worn, and his nail varnish was scratched and messy. However, the worst part was his face. His cheeks were red with dirt smeared among the scratches. Tears streamed down his face, and his eyes were bloodshot. His skin was pale, and his freckles looked sickly against it. Midoriya lowered his head after seeing Jirou's expression. "And no, I don't want to hurt you again." Tears threatened to fall down Jirou's face. She knew Izu was unstable, but he had been getting better. However, one interaction with his childhood bully had unraveled it all within seconds. Jirou grabbed Izu's hand. He tried to pull away, but she tightened her grip. "Look at me, Izu." Midoriya shakily raised his head and met Jirou's eyes. "I'm fine," she said with a smile, hugging the broken boy. "BBBBU," Midoriya started. "I'm fine," Jirou repeated, tightening her hold on the green-haired boy for reassurance. Midoriya sniffled before gripping Jirou's hug and wailing, "Why me?" Jirou said nothing, just stroking his back in empathetic silence. It was very early, and Jirou was frustrated. Her date with Izu had been ruined the day before, and she was ready to confront the classmates who had caused trouble. Izu was so nervous and jumpy that they hadn't done anything romantic. He was scared of hurting her again, despite her reassurances. In the end, she had to drop him off at his house and leave him with his mother. As she crossed the road, her scowl was still visible. "They better pray we don't have hero classes," she thought as she passed through the UA gates. She eventually made her way to the classroom, steeling herself for interactions with people she wanted to confront. The once bustling class suddenly fell silent as they turned to see her. She glared at them and made her way to her seat. A tap on her shoulder made her turn around to see her friend Yamamo. "Jirou," she started, but Jirou interrupted. "Save it, Yaoyorozu. Mr. Aizawa is going to come through the door any moment now." She turned back around, still scowling. Though she knew she was coming across as harsh, her thoughts were consumed by Izu and the months of therapy that felt wasted. True to her words, Aizawa entered the class with his usual bored expression but raised an eyebrow at the already silent class. "That's new," he noted before starting homeroom. Luckily for her, There were no hero classes that day, so her anger was directed into glares instead of confrontations. She could feel her classmates on edge, and even the teachers raised eyebrows at her glares during subjects. Their opinions meant nothing to her. They had hurt Izu, and she would never forgive that. Eventually, the class broke for lunch, and everyone prepared to leave. Suddenly, she heard a cough and turned to Seita, Yamamo, Mina, and Kirishima. She gave them a bored expression and sighed. "Well," she said impatiently. "We deeply apologize for our actions," Ida said, bowing at a perfect angle along with the others. "Our actions were wrong and unbecoming of hero students." "That makes up for everything, doesn't it?" she replied sarcastically. "We're really sorry, Jirou," Yamamo said with a sad face. "We snooped around in your personal business and ruined your date, and we are very sorry for it." Jirou gritted her teeth. They didn't even know the real reason for her anger. "You think I'm upset about the date?" she snapped, causing them to jump back. "It's about you bringing that Pomeranian with you, sending my boyfriend back months of therapy." Their faces morphed into shock. What did Bakugo do?" Mina stammered. "Why don't you ask him?" Jirou snarled before storming out, ready to eat outside alone. The group remained silent after Jirou left, still shaken by her outburst. They had tried to talk to Bakugo about it yesterday, but he had just remained silent. Kirishima turned around and stormed over to Bakugo, shocking everyone that he would be the first to confront him. Bakugo raised an eyebrow as Kirishima loomed over him with a frustrated expression. "What do you want, shitty hair?" the explosive teen asked. "How do you know Jirou's boyfriend, Bakugo?" Kirishima asked coldly. "Huh? Why should I tell you about shitty Deku?" Bakugo replied, confused. "Because the moment he noticed you, he had a panic attack and ran off," Kirishima retorted coldly. Bakugo glared at Kirishima, his laid-back attitude replaced with seriousness. The class held their breath, watching the tension unfold. Bakugo turned around, packed up the rest of his things with a tish, and walked out. "Mind your own business, Kirishima," the blonde snarled before exiting the classroom. The class just stared, surprised that Bakugo had called Kirishima by his actual name, without a nickname. "What was that about, Kirishima?" Shoji asked, concerned. Kirishima shook his head and left as well. The day finally ended, and Jirou had kept to herself throughout. As she made her way out of the school, she was suddenly pulled into an alleyway by an unknown assailant. Jirou reacted quickly, whipping at the attacker with her jacks, only for them to be caught. She looked at the attacker and her expression twisted into one of disgust. Right in front of her was none other than Katsuki Bakugo, looking angrier than usual. "Bakugo, what are you doing?" she shouted. "What do you see in that nerd?" Bakugo snarled, still holding onto her jacks. "Why should I tell you?" she replied, trying to wriggle free. "Because that nerd is a pain in my butt, and he's nothing but a quirkless Deku." Jirou's eyes widened in anger, and she punched him hard in the face. Bakugo stumbled back, crying out in pain. He quickly got up, snarling at Jirou. "You're dead," he growled, preparing to unleash an explosion. "You should probably think first before trying that," Jirou spat, her voice sharp. "And why is that?" Bakugo retorted, still ready to attack. "Because I know what you said to him." Bakugo froze, recognizing the gravity of her words. "Izuku told me everything," Jirou said, her anger palpable. "If you even think about hurting either him or me, I'll go straight to the principal with your past." Bakugo's eyes widened in realization. "Damn you," he muttered, understanding the seriousness of his situation. "If it were up to me, you'd be expelled the moment I found out," Jirou continued, beginning to exit the alley. "But for some reason he still thinks you deserve to be a hero." Bakugo looked down, scowling at her words. "So enjoy the hero course you don't deserve, Kaken," she added. Bakugo's anger flared. He hated that name, and hearing it from her only fueled his rage. "You beach!" he screamed, using his quirk to launch himself at her. However, Jirou swiftly turned, caught his punch, flipped him over, and slammed him to the ground. Bakugo lay there in shock, processing what had just happened. She had perfectly predicted his movements and countered them with ease. Jirou looked down at him. Izuku's stronger than you think, she said before walking out of the alley, leaving him on the cold ground in disbelief. Jirou decided to visit Izuku instead of going home. She had 2 reasons. He had agreed to help her study for the summer camp entrance exam, and she needed comfort after the earlier confrontation. As she approached his apartment, she hoped he would be there and not his mother. To her relief, it was Izuku who answered, his eyes widening in surprise. "Kyo?" he asked, confused. Without waiting for a response, Jirou grabbed his arm and led him upstairs to his room. "Kyo?" he repeated, his face turning red with confusion. Once they reached his room, she pushed him onto the bed and leaped on him, wrapping her arms around him and snuggling into his chest. She felt the heat radiating from him, noticing the steam rising from his ears. He stuttered, trying to process what was happening. Although they had been affectionate before, this felt different, and it sent his mind racing. In response to his hesitation, Jirou began to pepper his face with kisses, her affection intense. Izuku frowned. He loved her affection, but he knew she only acted this way when something was wrong. "What's wrong, Kyo?" he asked, cupping her face. Jirou frowned, annoyed that he could see through her. "It's nothing," she lied. Izuku sighed and started to get off the bed, determined to get her to open up. "Wait, I'll tell you, please stay," she pleaded, desperate not to lose their moment together. Izuku smirked and lay back down, victorious. Jirou pouted but wrapped herself around him like a body pillow. After a comfortable silence, she finally spoke. "Today, our stalkers tried apologizing to me about yesterday," she said with a sigh. "Isn't that a good thing?" Izuku questioned, wrapping his arms around her. "They apologized for the wrong thing," Jirou said, looking up at him. "They apologized for ruining the date, but not about bringing that dog and hurting you." Izuku looked down, his face full of love. "You're always trying to protect me, aren't you?" he said with a smile. Jirou blushed and buried her face in his chest to hide it. "As much as I appreciate you defending me," he continued, "they didn't hurt me, Kyo." Jirou looked up in surprise. "They brought your childhood bully with them and caused you to have a panic attack," she quickly replied. Izuku just kept smiling. "I'll admit that they didn't exactly help with my mental state," he started, stroking her back. "But they didn't know about me and Bakugo, Kyo." "But," Jirou tried to reply but was stopped by Izuku's finger on her lips. "No buts, Kyo," Izuku said gently. "They did nothing wrong. Please don't ruin your relationship with them for my sake." Jirou sighed and looked up at her boyfriend. "You're lucky you're cute," she muttered before kissing him, causing him to chuckle. "What else is it, Kyo?" "That isn't enough to get you this clingy," Izuku said after they separated. Jirou sighed and looked up at him. "I ran into a certain someone on the way here," she said with clear distaste in her voice, causing Izuku to tighten his grip around her. "Don't tell me." Izuku started, groaning. "Yup," Jirou said in a tired, sarcastic voice. "The explosive prick himself." "Did he do anything to you?" Izuku asked, concerned. "Nah, I used your wise teachings and flipped him on his back," Jirou replied snugly. "I also warned him to stay away from you, or I'd expose him to the principal." "You what?" Izuku said in shock. Jirou looked up at him with a serious expression. "Izu, I'm sorry, but you are far too lenient with him, and he doesn't deserve it," she said, deciding to stand her ground. "Still, Kyo, it's not your decision to make," Izuku said, sitting up angrily. "Come on, Izu. This is a decision I need to make for both of us." Jirou argued back. "I'm not going to let some bully walk all over the boy I love." Izuku froze at this. "You love me?" he said in shock, his face turning red. Jirou's face lit up as she realized what she had said, then calmed down and looked back at him with a softer blush. "How could I not, Izu?" she said, caressing his cheek. Izuku leaned into her touch, his eyes filled with love. "I love you too," he said, closing the gap between them. Jirou's eyes widened at the kiss, but she eventually relaxed and leaned into it. Izuku gently moved her to the bed, still kissing her, and lay her down. Jirou blushed at the implications and broke away from the kiss. "What are you doing?" she said, flustered and a bit worried. She was surprised at the sudden intimacy, as it was usually her who initiated it. Furthermore, she wasn't sure she was ready for this level of closeness. Izuku smiled at her lovingly. "I'm just showing you how much I love you." Knowing Izu wouldn't do anything without her permission, Jirou relaxed and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Then show away, Greenie," she said with a smile, feeling that their argument was no longer a problem and that Izu was still the same lovable person. Needless to say, Jirou forgot all about her troubles that day. Midoriya was very tired. He had already spent plenty of time helping his girlfriend study and was now making coffee for noisy customers. While drowning out the complaints, Midoriya thought back to the night before. He still wasn't happy about Kyoka confronting Bakugo and was even less pleased about his sudden involvement with her class. After Izuku had given up on his dreams of being a hero, he wanted to stay as far away from any reminders of it as possible. And could you blame him? He had wanted to be a hero his whole life, and the only thing keeping it all together was his ex-idol, All Might. "Hey!" Midoriya was brought out of his daydreaming by an impatient customer. "Oh, sorry, miss," he apologized, quickly finishing off the lady's coffee. "Were you sleeping on the job?" the lady shrieked, causing Midoriya to wince. "Miss, can you please keep the noise down?" Midoriya quietly pleaded. "You're disturbing the other customers." "How dare you assume I'm not married?" she replied loudly, clearly ignoring his request. "And what happened to the customer knows best, young man?" Midoriya sighed. This was going to take ages and the queue was only getting longer. Luckily, his kind boss entered, hearing the racket, and tapped him on the shoulder. Midoriya knew from past experiences that it meant, "I'll handle this, move on to the next customer." He did as he was told and moved on to the next one as his boss took care of the noisy customer. How can I help you?" he said with a wide smile. However, as he took a good look, his smile dropped. Right in front of him were Mina Ishido, Denki Kaminari, and Ejiro Kirishima. Mina was bouncing with excitement, Kirishima was smiling warmly, and Kaminari was giving him a skeptical look. "You're Jirou's boyfriend, aren't you?" the pink-haired girl exclaimed. Midoriya stuttered, unsure how to reply. While he wasn't going to run away again, he didn't know how to respond without causing problems. Mina was getting closer and closer, bouncing with excitement, while Midoriya felt increasingly uncomfortable. Luckily, Kirishima noticed this and pulled back Mina. "Sorry about her, bro," he said with a toothy grin. "She gets hyper when it comes to romance." Midoriya sighed and relaxed. He must be the voice of reason, he thought, flashing a smile back at Kirishima. "And no worries," Midoriya replied. "And now about your order." After they finally ordered, Midoriya figured he owed them answers and went to sit with them. He had a friend who could cover for him for a couple of minutes. "Sorry about spying on you and Jirou in the park," Kirishima said with an apologetic look. "We were mainly following our gossip queen over here." He gestured to Mina, who let out a gasp. "How dare you throw me under the bus like that?" she said with an angry pout. "Oh, you don't have to worry about it. I was kinda anxious about you knowing." "Why?" This question came from Kaminari, who was eyeing Midoriya closely. "Oh, well, me and Kaken don't really have the best relationship, to be honest," Midoriya stammered, clearly uncomfortable. "Who's Kaken?" Kirishima asked, confused. "Oh, Kaken is just my nickname for Bakugo," Midoriya explained quickly. "Oh, well that makes sense," Mina said. "He was kinda bad-mouthing you when we confronted him about you." Midoriya froze. He hadn't heard that voice in a long time. "Why yeah, that's not surprising," he stammered, trying to ignore it. "Stop stuttering, you're making them hate you," the voice echoed in his mind. Midoriya flinched. "So how long have you and Jirou been together?" Kirishima asked, quickly changing the topic. Kaminari leaned in, interested in the question. Well, we met in the UA entrance exam and slowly got to know each other," Midoriya said nervously under Kaminari's intense gaze. "We kinda bonded while waiting for the results, and when Kyo got in, we decided we wanted to spend more time together." Kaminari seemed unhappy with the answer, making a teeth sound and looking away. "That's so adorable." Mina squealed, squeezing a blushing Kirishima's arm. Wait, Kirishima interjected. You entered the entrance exam? Midoriya sighed, realizing he couldn't avoid this now. Yeah, I did. Didn't get in though, he said. Wow. You must have a manly quirk to try and get in. Kirishima exclaimed. Midoriya's heart sank. Actually, it's the opposite, he said, catching their attention. I'm quirkless. Kirishima immediately looked down in regret, Mina paused her bouncy nature, and Kaminari looked shocked. Sorry, bro, that's probably a sensitive topic for you, Kirishima said apologetically. Oh no, don't worry about it. Midoriya quickly stammered back. Kyoka's gotten me much more comfortable about it now. The group sat in awkward silence. What happened between you and B? Kaminari started to ask but was interrupted by a voice at the counter. Oi Midoriya. Your break's over, shouted a woman at the counter with a bored expression. Gotta go. It was nice talking to you, Midoriya said, jogging back to the counter. He felt secretly relieved at the interruption, as he feared the voice would overwhelm him. Not long after he returned to his shift, Jirou's friends left. He knew he had soured the mood with his news, but he figured it was better coming from him than Kyoka. The voices had quieted down, and luckily he had no more interruptions during his shift. A couple of hours passed, and his shift was finally done. He waved to his boss and left the cafe, breathing a sigh of relief once outside. Day? A voice said. He smiled and looked at the owner of the voice. You have no idea, he replied, grimacing. To his right was his appealing girlfriend, Kyoka Jirou, looking as stunning as ever. Well, at least your amazing girlfriend can help make up for that, she said with a smile, latching onto his arm. He smiled as she dragged him along, like a child with a puppy. Oh, that reminds me, he exclaimed, grabbing her attention. You'll never guess who I met. Kyo turned to him with a raised eyebrow. Humor me, she said skeptically. I ran into some of your friends from your class, he said, smiling warmly at her. However, Kyo clearly didn't take it as well as he did, as her aura shifted from happy to something more intense. Which ones? She asked, preparing her jacks. I gulped. T the pink one, T the red-haired one, and the B blonde one with the black electric spark. I stammered, thoroughly intimidated. Those are the gossipy ones. Kyoka groaned. They're never gonna shut up about it. They seemed okay to me, I said, trying to reassure my annoyed girlfriend. Although I did kinda ruin the mood by telling them I was quirkless. Kyo quirked an eyebrow at this and looked at me. You told them you were quirkless? How did they react? She asked curiously. The red and pink-haired ones were sympathetic and apologetic for bringing it up, I said with a shrug. The yellow-haired one looked kinda shocked and confused, which was weird though. Kyo nodded at the information. What's with you telling them? You usually keep it to yourself. Well, I guess I'm just tired of changing myself for people, I said with a sigh. I mean, if you can put up with me, then I guess it isn't out of the question for others to either. Kyo latched onto my arm, causing us to stop walking. I don't know why you view yourself so lowly, she said with a concerned expression. You're an amazing person, and I'm just one of the few lucky people that see you for you. I winced at the voice in my head, which didn't go unnoticed by Kyo. You okay? She asked, holding her hand up to my face, softly caressing it. Why, yeah, just tired, I guess, I lied, hoping Kyo wouldn't notice. She squinted her eyes at me, analyzing every detail before nodding. Makes sense, we did have a long study session last night, she said, removing her hand. Slowly, we kept walking, enjoying the sunset and the gentle breeze. Eventually, we stopped at our favorite beach and gazed at it with pride. We often visited, so it wasn't a surprise that we ended up here. After I failed to get in, Kyo and I decided to clean up the beach. I needed a distraction from my failure, and Kyo needed to train for UA, so we figured cleaning it would be beneficial for both of us. And it was. The beach was stunning, with the coast finally visible and not a single piece of garbage in sight. The appealing sea reflected the evening sunlight perfectly, and the sand seemed to glow with warm radiance as it heated up under the dimming rays. Flashback. It was early in the morning, and I was anything but enthusiastic. I had been up all night thanks to the voices, and they were still present. Luckily, I had a solution to this problem: moving trash. The added bonus of hanging out with Kyo also helped me release the stress. I'd never admit it to her, but I had a huge crush on her. But could you blame me? She was stunning and the first person not to judge me for my lack of a quirk. Everything about her was just amazing. Unfortunately, that's exactly why I was never going to act on it. She was perfect, whereas I felt like just a useless Deku. I simply didn't deserve her. I eventually reached my destination and shielded my eyes from the blinding light. Wait, light? I thought in confusion, waiting for my eyes to adjust. What I saw shocked me. Right in front of me was an appealing sunrise, unchained from the obstructive waste hiding its beauty. Its warm orange rays illuminated me and the houses around me, almost making me tear up at the sight. However, what really made me break down was who was standing in front of it all. Standing in front of the sunlight was Kyokujiro. Her hair was messy and filled with sand, her clothes clung to her skin, most likely from sweat. Her arms lay limp by her sides, and she seemed slightly hunched over. After noticing this, I realized she was about to fall over and ran over to catch her. As she fell into my arms, she looked up, her eyes looking like they could droop at any moment. I was overwhelmed with happiness, as no words could possibly describe how I felt. Jirou then took it a step further and placed a hand on my face, beaming from ear to ear. She closed the gap and connected our lips, making me widen my eyes in shock. Most people describe the first kiss as explosive, yet to me, it felt like a raging fire. It spread through my veins, igniting my body. Eventually, we disconnected, and I found Jirou asleep, smiling. I smiled down at her and then looked up at the sunrise. "You really are amazing," I said as I held onto her tightly, hoping it wasn't all a dream. Flashback over, I smiled at the memory. It was when we confessed our feelings, and when I realized that I loved something more than heroes. We made our way down to the sand, removing our shoes and socks while rolling up our trousers. We then sat in front of the sea, the water traveling between our toes, yet not reaching the rest of our bodies. I looked at her, the appealing sunset rays illuminating her face. "I love you," I said, not caring how corny it sounded. Kyo looked at me and smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "I love you too." We both sat in silence, knowing that things would get complicated with her class knowing about us. However, we had each other and that was enough. Right? Jirou's POV. The week of preparation passed uncomfortably quickly, but I was sure that Izu had prepared me well. We had gone over everything that could come up in the test, and I felt confident that I could give Yamamo a run for her money. The one thing I was worried about was the physical exam. We didn't know what it would entail, and Izu could only suggest ideas for new moves with my quirk. I entered the school gates and walked into the classroom. I knew I had no excuse to be mad at them anymore, since Izu had decided to be understanding. I opened the classroom door and sat down at my seat, quickly opening my notebook, identical to Izu's, and scanned through my notes. I wasn't going to fall behind or miss out on the school camp. I didn't want to stick around with the less motivated students in the class. I heard someone clear their throat and looked up. My raven-haired best friend stood in front of my seat, looking uncomfortable yet eager. "How did your study go, Jirou?" Yamamo asked nervously. I sighed, feeling bad for making her worried, and realized I had been a bit too cold. "It's fine, Yamamo, you don't have to worry," I said with an apologetic smile. "I'm not mad anymore." Yamamo sighed with relief and smiled back. "Thank goodness," she said, clearly relieved. "But if you don't mind me asking, what made you forgive us?" I pondered telling her. It wasn't exactly embarrassing, but I wondered how much I should share. Well, Izu eventually talked to me and calmed me down, telling me that I shouldn't ruin our friendship over his sake. Yamamo perked up at this. "Well, be sure to thank him on my behalf." "Sure," I replied. Before we could continue our conversation, Mr. Aizawa entered, and we started our tests. I was surprised at how easy everything felt. Studying with Izu, while slightly tedious, clearly paid off. Afterwards, I was almost certain I had passed and walked to lunch happily. During lunch, we learned from the Class 1B representative that we would be up against robots. I sighed with relief when I heard this, as it was basically the same as the entrance exam. After lunch, I made my way with the girls to the changing rooms and got ready. However, as I changed, I saw the other girls and felt a pang of insecurity. Izu would always tell me that I was appealing, never missing a chance to shower me with compliments. But looking at the other girls made me doubt myself. I'm as flat as a board compared to them, I thought. What does he see in me? Another horrible thought crept into my head. What if he sees the others and replaces me? I shook my head. That's crazy talk, Izu isn't like that. He's too kind. I shut my locker and left the changing room, steeling myself for the challenge ahead. I made my way to the field, finding that I was early. The only other person there was Kaminari, who was sitting on a bench. He seemed to perk up as I approached and smiled at me. Hey, Jirou, he said with his usual goofy grin. Hey, Kaminari, I replied, sitting down next to him. I pulled out my phone and plugged in my earphones, trying to get in the zone for the test. So, what do you think the test is gonna be? He asked, eager to break the silence. Weren't you there? I asked, looking at him confused. That ponytailed girl from 1B said we were fighting robots. His eager demeanor immediately shifted to embarrassment. Oh yeah, he stuttered, rubbing the back of his neck. I smirked at his forgetfulness. While Kaminari was a good guy, he wasn't the brightest. I went back to my phone, contemplating texting Izu, but decided against it since it would probably distract me. You know, I saw your boyfriend a couple of days ago, Kaminari said, trying to spark up conversation again. What surprised me was the tone he used for the word boyfriend. Does he have a problem with Izu? I thought. Yeah, he told me, I replied, looking up from my phone. You saw him at work with Ishido and Kirishima, right? Yeah, he told us he was quirkless. Is that true? He asked. I narrowed my eyes at this. I loved Izu despite his lack of a quirk, and I knew some people disliked him for it. I hoped Kaminari wasn't one of those people. Yeah, and nothing. I just didn't think there were any more quirkless around, he said, sounding more cautious. He realized he had stepped on one of my nerves. I grunted at his response and went back to my phone. We stayed in silence until the rest of the class arrived. I got up and started to talk with Yamamo and the others, while Kaminari joined Bakugo and the other boys. How do you feel about the exam, Jirou? Yamamo asked. Well, it's robots, right? So it should be pretty easy, I replied, although it's kind of weird that the school is going for something so simple. Indeed, Yamamo agreed. You would think they'd do something more challenging for us. How right you are, Monsieur Rozu, a voice called out. We all turned to see the pro heroes in front of us, including Mr. Aizawa, Snipe, Powloader, and Midnight. I smirked, thinking, Izu would lose his mind if he saw this. Why are all the heroes here? Kirishima asked, confused by the grand scene. It's quite simple, Mr. Kirishima, a voice said, surprisingly coming from Mr. Aizawa. Suddenly, a mouse-like creature emerged from his scarf, catching us off guard. You'll be fighting us, it squeaked. What? The class exclaimed, making me wince at the sudden noise. I'm in trouble, I thought as the teachers explained the exam. After learning how the exam would work and seeing our previous classmates pass and fail, it was finally my turn. I was paired with a shy guy named Kuda. I hadn't talked much with him before, but I knew he could communicate with animals thanks to his quirk. Since we were fighting Present Mike in a forest, his quirk would be advantageous. Hey, Kuda, I called, getting his attention. Since we'll be fighting Present Mike in a forest, we'll be depending on your quirk. As soon as I said that, I realized my mistake. His nervousness shot up. Oh no! I exclaimed. Sorry, man. Obviously, I'll help too. It's just that with you, we have the advantage. Luckily, he seemed to calm down and nodded. Kyuka Jirou and Kuji Kuda, please make your way to your designated training ground. Guess we're up, I said, smiling at Kuda as we left the room together. We got this. We so don't got this. I screamed as Present Mix quirk deafened me. To put it simply, everything had gone wrong. Kuda was too nervous to call on anything, and Present Mix quirk clearly outmatched mine. We had figured out that Kuda could talk to insects, but he was too scared to do so. To make matters worse, Present Mike was getting closer by the minute. Each time he let out a scream, it got louder, and my ears were ringing. I tried to think of a strategy, but nothing came to mind. All of Izu's strategies were useless here, and Kuda was too frightened to act. If only I could calm him down. Wait, that's it. Flashback. Izu and I were at the mall, hand in hand, celebrating our recent beach cleanup and our relationship. Izu was nervous about holding hands, but I was overjoyed. "Hey, let's go in here," I said, pointing to a music shop. I wanted to get Izu into music since he seemed a bit lost. "Are you sure?" he stammered as I pulled him inside. "Come on, it'll be fun," I insisted, leading him to the guitar section. I picked up a green acoustic guitar and started teaching him chord positions. Izu got lost in the music, but then I noticed he was shaking violently. "Izu, are you okay?" I asked, concerned. He was trembling, and his breathing was uneven. I followed his gaze and saw a guy with spiky blonde hair nearby, causing Izu to panic. "Izu, look at me," I urged, placing my hands on his face to direct his attention. "Me," I said firmly. "It's just you and me," I reassured him. "Forget about him and focus on me." Izu's breathing began to normalize as he looked into my eyes. "That's it," I said soothingly, stroking his hair. He clung to me and I held him close, calming him down gently. Flashback end. I focused back on Kuda and knew what I had to do. "Kuda!" I yelled, grabbing his attention. "Me." His eyes widened. "It's just you and me. Forget about Mike." Kuda straightened up, his panic subsiding slightly. "Now kick his butt," I shouted, my voice filled with determination. Kuda's eyes widened, then he nodded shakily and quickly put his face to the ground. At first, I was confused, but then I heard him whispering to the floor. Suddenly, I heard a scream from Mike and realized what he had done. "Way to go, Kuda!" I yelled, pumping my fist in success. To my surprise, Kuda took it one step further and picked me up. I immediately felt a rush of embarrassment for being carried by someone other than Izu. However, I soon realized that he knew I couldn't hear and was helping me to the finish line. We passed a cheering Present Mike and crossed the finish line, signaling the end of the exam. Kuda relinquished the bugs, and Present Mike retired to the waiting room, shivering from the recent encounter. I gave Kuda a fist bump before moving to my friends. "I did it, Izu," I thought to myself, silently thanking him as I greeted my friends. Summer camp, here I come. Izuku's POV. To say the day had been boring was an understatement. Who had been draining minute by minute, and the rest of the day had nothing planned either. I was pleased to hear from Kyo that she'd passed the summer camp exam, but I was surprised at how hard the physical assessment must have been. Facing pro heroes, weights or not, is a daunting challenge. However, it clearly was no problem for Kyo, as she sounded like pure sunlight over the phone. I was still kind of upset about her leaving for summer camp, even if it would help her with her hero studies. I had become too used to seeing her every day while studying, and I already wanted to spend more time with her. Midoriya. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered what they would be doing at the summer camp. Would it be physical training? Maybe even strategy? Midoriya. I was snapped out of my daydream by a slam on my desk. The surprise caused me to push back on my chair in fright, making me fall to the floor with a loud thud. The class erupted in laughter, and I could even see a hint of amusement on my teacher's face. "While you may be at the top of the class, don't think you can get away with daydreaming in lessons," the teacher snapped, not even bothering to act concerned about my fall. Sorry, sir," I stammered, scrambling to my feet and setting my chair up properly. The teacher merely sneered and walked back to his desk, muttering something under his breath. I flinched at the words. It didn't matter how often they were said to me, they always hurt more than any punch. I stared at the clock. There were 20 minutes left in class, but that felt like 20 minutes too long. I had already learned what the teacher was discussing, having read the exercise book at the beginning of the year. I had even corrected some points and added extra information. No one would want to admit that a quirkless kid was smarter than them, but I was. My grades never dropped, and some teachers even suspected I was cheating at times. At the end of the day, it didn't matter. I was here to have physical evidence that I deserved a job. I was here to prove I was qualified to help people. And that was all that mattered to me now. If I couldn't be a hero one way, I'd be a hero another. School finally ended, much to the teacher's annoyance, and I was free to do absolutely nothing. I stepped through the gate and sighed. This was the final day before Kyo was leaving for summer camp, and she had made no attempt to organize a meetup. Izuku. I turned to see Kyo and her class, all in casual clothes and beaming at me, minus Kaminari, who was scowling. It seemed that Kaken wasn't there, probably because of me. Kyo? What are you and your class doing here? I stammered, slightly overwhelmed by all the attention. We're going to get equipment for the summer camp, the pink-skinned girl said excitedly. I figured, since it's going to be a week until we see each other again, that you could tag along too? Kyo said shyly. I felt a smile spread across my face. I really do have the best girlfriend ever. Sure, I said, causing the class to cheer and set off for the mall. Kyo grabbed my hand and dragged me after them, clearly excited. So, Midoriya, a small purple-haired guy said, drool dripping from his mouth, how far have you and Jirou gone? I just looked down at the boy in disgust. In no time at all, we arrived at the Kiyoshi Ward shopping mall. Everyone split up for something, while I stayed with Jirou, who was accompanied by Yaoyorozu and Kaminari. I was slightly suspicious of Kaminari, as he'd been giving me dirty looks since we met. But it was possible he was just worried about Kyo, so I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Kyo needed to buy a bigger bag, so we went to the appropriate shop to help her. While Kyo was scanning the bag area with Kaminari, Yaoyorozu decided to talk to me. I hope you don't mind my asking, Midoriya, she politely started, but I was wondering if I could ask a couple of questions about you and Jirou. Sure, ask away, I said with a smile. I was spending the rest of the day with Kyo, and nothing could sour my mood. In that case, how long have the two of you been dating? Yaoyorozu inquired. Well, we basically started dating just before school started, and have been ever since, I replied calmly. I was less anxious this time around, since Yaoyorozu seemed to respect boundaries more. I see, she said, though that does raise the question of why you two kept it a secret for so long. I inhaled sharply at her response. So much for respecting boundaries. Well you see, it's kind of my fault, I stammered, unnerved. Yaoyorozu seemed to notice my nervousness and realized her mistake. Sorry Midoriya. Jirou told us about your mental health issues, and I hope I didn't overstep boundaries. I frowned a little at hearing Jirou had told them about my mental health. It was my personal matter, and it wasn't her place to share it. No, it's fine, I lied. I was just a little caught off guard. Anyway, I should probably explain, shouldn't I? I asked, scratching the back of my neck. Yaoyorozu nodded, signaling for me to continue. Kyo probably told you it was Kaken's fault for me running away, right? Yaoyorozu looked at me confused. Who's Kaken? She asked, puzzled. That's my nickname for Bakugo, I said, quickly correcting myself. Well in that case you're right, Yaoyorozu replied. Though she called him in Pomeranian, instead of Kaken. I chuckled at this. Why that sounds like Kyo, I said. Anyway, Kaken and I used to be childhood friends, but when he manifested his quirk and I didn't, he changed. Yaoyorozu suddenly looked shocked. You're quirkless, she said, surprised. I looked down, feeling the weight of her words. This was my chance to leave a good impression on Kyo's best friend, and I felt like I had messed it up. I started to shake as the voices in my head grew louder. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder and cheek. I looked up to see Kyo looking at me with concern. I started to calm down as I stared into her mesmerizing eyes. You okay there, Greenie? She asked, trying to lighten the mood. Why, I stammered back, catching my breath. I broke eye contact and looked behind Kyo to see a worried Yaoyorozu and a conflicted Kaminari. Sorry guys, I stammered. It's fine, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu replied. I'm sorry for upsetting you like that. She looked incredibly guilty, probably for triggering the whole ordeal. It's fine, I said, reassuring her. To be honest, I didn't expect myself to react this badly. Deciding to change the mood, I looked at the ground and saw a green and purple bag. A nice choice, I said. Kyo followed my line of sight and blushed. I figured if I got that color, then I wouldn't miss you as much, she said shyly. I laughed, causing her to pout. Then, let's buy it already, I exclaimed, dragging Kyo to the till with the bag. After getting the bag, we went to a couple of other shops before heading back. Kyo was holding my hand a little tighter than usual. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was noticeable. Kyo looked up at me. Are you sure you're okay? She asked, concerned. Why, yeah, I said, squeezing her hand. I'm fine. However, this answer clearly didn't comfort her, as she only seemed sad about it afterwards. After we reconvened with the rest of the class and headed home, it was only Kyo and me on the train back. Kyo was fast asleep, but I couldn't join her. I had too much on my mind. Eventually, we reached our stop, and I shook Kyo awake. Walked to her house in silence until we reached the front door. Well, this is it, she said, looking up at me a little sad. It's only a week, Kyo, I reassured her. We've had worse. I dunno, I guess I'm just worried. About? I asked, wincing. She'd clearly noticed. Ever since the picnic, you've been different, Kyo said, placing a hand on my cheek. I know, but I'll be fine, Kyo. Kyo nodded and brought me into a tender kiss. I smiled into it and placed my hands on her waist as she wrapped her arms around my neck. We continued this for a few more seconds before disconnecting and touching foreheads. I'll miss you, Izu. I'll miss you too. Kyo turned for the door, and I suddenly remembered something. Oh, by the way, Kyo, I said, grabbing her attention, watch out for Kaminari, I think he has a crush on you. Kyo widened her eyes at this. Are you sure? She asked. Not 100%, but he's been giving me looks since he found out we're a thing. Kyo simply nodded and placed another kiss on my lips. See you in a week, Greenie, she said, opening the front door. See you in a week, Violet. Izuku POV, this was it. The final text had been sent, and my girlfriend was gone for the week. While I was happy that she'd be honing her skills away from distractions, I couldn't help but feel sad she had to go. To make matters worse, it was the summer holidays and I had nothing to do now. I'd usually spend this time with Kyo, but that was obviously no longer an option. Now that I think about it, what do I do without Kyo? Thought to myself. I guess that guitar was a hobby thanks to Kyo, but other than that and hanging with her, I had nothing. Well, I better think of something, or I'll spend the whole summer bored. I looked outside to see the sun shining brightly and decided to go for a walk. Mom, I'm gonna go for a walk, I announced, slipping on my shoes. I sighed as I heard no reply. I knew she'd heard me, but recently she'd been far more quiet and distant. I pondered on it more as I left the apartment, closing the door behind me. The day I was diagnosed, I became more closed off from my mom. It was mainly since she shared everyone else's view of me not being able to be a hero. But now more than ever, things had become even more strained. She never looks at me anymore, never says anything unless spoken to, and to make matters worse, she is working more than ever. It almost feels like she's avoiding me, I thought as I walked down the street. Usually, I wouldn't mind being left alone, as it would give me more time with Kyo. However, this time she was the only person I could talk to without feeling judged. We couldn't dance around one another forever. I've decided, I silently announced to myself. I'm going to fix my relationship with my mother. It was an hour before dinner, and I decided that I'd make dinner for us. Mom was out at work since they'd called her last minute for help, so I had all the time in the world. I was making katsudon since Kyo told me I was good at making it. As I prepared the meal, my mind drifted back to another time I had that meal. Flashback, I was in heaven. Kyo and I were snuggling on the sofa while eating katsudon. I decided to take advantage of my mom's absence and have a nice dinner date with Kyo. Kyo immediately jumped at the offer and even came over early. You know, Izu, Kyo said, interrupting my thoughts. Even though I've been to your house twice now, I've never seen your mom. I turned towards Kyo and held onto her a little tighter than usual. Why, she's kinda busy most of the time, I lied. Kyo frowned at this and jabbed me playfully. Liar, she said with a pout, while glaring at me. I didn't even need my quirk to tell that you were lying, Izu. I sighed and stopped eating. Me and my mom haven't had a decent conversation since I was 4, I said with a sigh, sinking into the sofa. Kyo sat up and stared in disbelief. What about your dad? She asked, clearly concerned. Working abroad, I haven't seen him for years. Kyo just stared at me shocked. I don't know what to say. Kyo replied, intertwining our hands for comfort. It's fine, Kyo, I honestly don't mind it, I said, squeezing her hand for reassurance. Kyo frowned, knowing that I lied, but said nothing and snuggled closer to me. Greenie? You know I'm always here for you, right? I looked at the empty room we were in and looked back at Kyo. Yeah, I do. Flashback and an hour had passed by, and I just finished cooking and was setting the table when I heard the door open and close, confirming that Mom had just returned. Hey Mom! I yelled, alerting her to my presence. Hello Izuku, she said back in an uneasy tone. I'll cook dinner shortly, don't worry. Oh, don't worry about that, I decided to cook for both of us. I shouted back. I've actually just finished. I cooked katsudon. Mom entered the room with a surprised look on her face. Oh, what's the occasion? I smiled and placed the food on the table, showing that I was done. I figured it's been a while since we had a decent conversation, I said, pulling out a chair for her, so why not catch up? Oh, okay then, Mom stammered, sitting down anxiously. I was confused why she seemed nervous and apprehensive but dismissed it as her being her usual emotional self. I joined her at the table, and we both started to eat in awkward silence, the sound of chewing and clinking being the only noticeable noise. So, how's work been? I asked, breaking the silence. Oh, it's fine, dear, she said nervously as she continued to eat. Another awkward silence arose, and I was confused why. We hadn't talked properly in years, and yet Mom seemed nervous and uncooperative with conversation. I started to hear a squeaky noise and looked up to see Mom's hands shaking, causing the chopsticks to make a squeaky noise against the plate. Mom, are you okay? I asked, concerned. Mom flinched at the question and looked up at me. Oh, I'm fine, dear. Why do you ask? She dismissed nervously. Well, you've been stuttering this whole time, and you're shaking, I stated, concerned. Are you sure everything's fine? Mom flinched at my words and started to shake. She looked down and continued to eat, ignoring my question. Deciding to leave it alone, I went back to eating. Suddenly, I heard sniffles from the other side of the table, and I shot up to see Mom shaking more heavily than before. My eyes widened at the scene. Was a family dinner really doing this much damage? I'm sorry, Izuku, Mom stammered out while weeping. And so sorry. I couldn't believe my eyes. What was making her cry? Why was she apologizing? I asked, confused. Mom shot up at my words and looked around frantically. I can't do this, she whispered to herself, tears dripping from her eyes. Before I could say anything, Mom quickly ran out of the dining room, into her room, and slammed the door. I just stared at the half-eaten bowl of katsudon. What just happened? Jirou's POV. I'd texted goodbye to Izu and my parents and got onto the bus. Truly, the camp started now. I managed to grab a seat near the back, but Yamamo was sitting with Todoroki. I plugged in my jack to my phone and selected my road trip playlist. It had a mix of songs I liked and a couple of Izu's recommendations. I clicked shuffle and sunk into my seat. However, I was interrupted by a certain human Pikachu. Kaminari sat down next to me and placed his bag under his seat. He turned to me and definitely saw the look on my face. I wasn't happy to see him. According to Izu, he'd been giving him dirty looks and asking intrusive questions. In other words, he wasn't in my good books currently. I came here to say sorry. My face changed from a glare to surprise. I was rude when it came to your boyfriend being quirkless, and I wasn't being a good friend, Kaminari continued. I'm sorry. I was surprised. Jamming Ye wasn't one to say sorry, and I could tell that he meant it. I smiled and nodded. Apology accepted, I replied. Kaminari's face burst into a goofy grin, which I just shook my head at. Whatcha listening to? Kaminari asked, looking at my phone. See for yourself, I replied, connecting my right jack into his ear. He seemed to blush at the contact before noticing the song. Aw, hell yeah. Deep dope. Kaminari cried out, sinking into his seat. I looked back at him bobbing his head to the music and smiled. Maybe Iza didn't have anything to worry about after all. About 4 hours had passed, and the bus hissed, signaling its stop. I sat up and looked out the window to see that we were on a ridge overlooking a forest. Why are we stopping now? I asked myself, getting out of my seat with the rest of the class. I poked Kaminari with my jack, waking him up from his sleep. Rise and shine, jamming yay, I said while exiting the bus. Everyone was muttering about us stopping early, and the sounds of joints popping from the journey made my ears cringe. Before us was an old-fashioned car. Hey, Eraser! A voice called out from the car. Long time no see, Mr. Aizawa replied while bowing. Suddenly, 2 women wearing cat outfits sprang out of the car, followed by a small boy. Lock on with these sparkling gazes, one in red cried out. Stingingly cute and cat-like, the one in blue continued. Wild, wild pussycats, they both cried out together while posing. The class just stared at them, slightly confused. Mr. Aizawa sighed and explained, these are the pro heroes who'll be working with us during the camp. We own this whole stretch of land here. You'll be staying at the foot of that mountain, the red pussycat explained while gesturing to the forest below us. Then why did we stop here? Uraraka asked. Tsuyu put her finger to her chin. Could this mean? She pondered. I suddenly caught onto her train of thought. Oh no, I thought to myself. Why don't we get back to the bus, huh? Shiro suggested nervously, while the rest of the class started to slowly back away. It's 9:30 a.m. right now, the red pussycat stated while smiling. If you're fast, maybe around noon. No way. Guys. Kirishima started. Run. Kiddies who don't make it by 12:30 won't get any lunch, the red one announced. We all rushed past Mr. Aizawa while he looked at us with a bored expression. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, he said to us. Training camp has already begun. Suddenly, the blue pussycat pounced in front of us and placed her paws on the ground. The ground began to rise up and push us over the edge and down into the forest. Would stuff like this weigh too much? I groaned, standing up. Mineta suddenly shot past us all, holding his crotch. We all had looks of disgust at the perverted midget until they changed into shock. In front of our class, the pervert was confronted by a giant monster. Shinso used his scarf to pull Mineta out of the way of the monster's fist. Koda tried to call out to the beast, but was met with no response. Why isn't Koda's quirk working? I wondered while observing the creature. Suddenly, a crumbling rock caught my eye. I remembered what the blue pussycat had done earlier and realized what was happening. Todoroki stepped into action and froze the beast, while our class rep charged through it, flames flickering from his calves. Bakugo followed soon after. Die! He yelled, blasting away the beast's right arm. Shiro and Sato approached Todoroki, praising him, while Kirishima did the same with our hot-headed blonde. However, amidst their chatter, I heard rumbling in the distance. We're not done yet. I cried out, grabbing the class's attention. Suddenly, the sound of more beasts echoed around us. Come on, how many of them are there? Kaminari complained. This is no joke, Sato exclaimed. If we don't make it to the facility by noon, we won't get lunch. Then we have no choice, Yamamoto announced to the class, but to get through here and take the shortest route. We all nodded in agreement, though I groaned internally. This food better be worth it. We sprang into action, Sato and Kirishima pummeling the beasts, Uraraka and Tsuyu sending them flying, and Yamamoto using her cannon to blow them up. I spotted another beast unattended and decided it was a good time to test my new move. I extended my jacks to the highest branch on the nearest tree and launched myself into the air. Detaching my jacks, I sent them into the beast's back, using them as grappling hooks. Once I landed, I focused on my breathing and pumped my heartbeat into the beast, reducing it to rubble. Yes! I cried out, landing triumphantly. Way to go, Jirou! Mina cheered, impressed by my new move. As I continued after the next beast, I reminisced about how I created this move. Flashback. I was reading a comic in Izu's room during a study break. "Hey Izu," I announced, resting my head on his lap. He looked down at me, signaling he was listening. "Do you think I could do this?" I pointed at a comic of Spider-Man swinging. Izu's eyes lit up. "Kyo, you're a genius," he exclaimed, standing up. I grumbled about losing my lap pillow but felt happy about my idea. "Your jacks could work just as well as his web shooters, increasing your mobility in combat." Izu continued excitedly. "You could also use them to help in hostage situations." I sweat dropped at his enthusiastic muttering. "Izu," I interrupted. "Let's go test it outside." He nodded eagerly, and we rushed outside to the nearest tree. End of flashback. After what felt like an eternity, we made it through the forest and arrived at the camp. My jacks were exhausted, and I wasn't the only one feeling fatigued. Kaminari was in his usual goofy mode, I was supporting Momo, and Bakugo's hands were shaking. I couldn't help but smirk at Bakugo, though I kept it to myself. You finally made it," the blue pussycat exclaimed, causing me to glare at her. "What do you mean, 3 hours?" Kirishima cried, holding his stomach on the floor. "That's the time it would have taken us." "Sorry," the blue pussycat replied. "That's just adding insult to injury," Kaminari muttered, making me snort. "But honestly, I thought it'd take even longer," the blue pussycat reassured us. "You guys didn't have as hard a time beating my earth beasts as I thought you would." I was still glaring but felt a sense of pride that we exceeded their expectations. "You guys are great," she continued, pointing at Bakugo, Todoroki, Ida, and me. "Way to go, Jirou." Hagakure cheered before catching her breath. "Was it because of your experience that you jumped into action?" she asked, pouncing on us. "I'm looking forward to where you'll be in 3 years." She began to smother us while shouting, "Dibs." Stopping at me, she sniffed. "Someone's already called dibs on you," she said with a pout. I blushed at her words and looked around her to see a little boy. "Who's the kid?" I asked, pointing at him. "Oh, he's my cousin's kid," the red pussycat replied. "Come on, Koda. Greet everyone." The kid gave us all a glare, and Ida walked up to him. "Greetings. I am Tenya Ida from U.A's hero course. Nice to meet you." Ida was interrupted by a sudden blow. The kid had wound up and struck him. All the boys winced while I broke down laughing. "I don't want to hang out with wannabe heroes," the kid snarled, walking off. Bakugo grinned. "Brat's got spunk," he said. "He's like a mini you," Todoroki added, echoing my thoughts. I tuned out after this, focusing on Mr. Aizawa. "Alright, enough is enough. Get your stuff off the bus," he said in his usual tone. "Once you've put your bags in your rooms, we'll have dinner in the cafeteria. Make sure to rest up, we'll start for real tomorrow." He finished before walking off. After eating faster than I thought possible and realizing this was the only time we'd been cooked for, we went to the hot springs to relax. "Hey Jirou, what was that move earlier?" Tsuyu asked, pulling me from my thoughts. "Yeah, it was so cool," Uraraka added, causing me to blush from all the attention. Well, I got the idea from a comic while I was studying," I explained. "I saw how a hero from an American comic swung around the city and decided to try it for myself." "What's it called?" Ashido asked curiously. "I don't have a name for it yet," I replied, before dipping my head under the water. "That's a shame, but it clearly works," Yamamo complimented. "Not perfectly," I explained. "It hurts my ears to do it since I'm moving my whole body weight with just them. If I'm not careful, I could hurt myself." We all shuddered at the thought, before being interrupted by a loud voice. "Walls are meant to be climbed over." I scowled at the voice and prepared my jacks. Suddenly, Koda caught the purple-haired boy and pushed him back down. I smirked at the little brat's downfall, proud of him. "Thanks, Koda," Ashido cried out. However, This caused Kota to lose his balance and fall toward our end. Tsuyu quickly used her tongue to grab him, stopping him from hitting the ground. "Is Kota alright?" we heard Kirishima call out. "He's fine, we'll take him to Mandalay," I shouted back, before taking Kota from Tsuyu. "You sure, Jirou?" Yamamo questioned. "Yeah, don't worry. I'll be back soon." With that, I left the spring and ran to Mandalay's office, unaware of how long I'd really be gone. Bakugo was frustrated. His school year had been going perfectly until Deku found a way to insert himself back into it. He knew that Deku had tried the hero exam and was unsurprised by his failings. It was just as he'd told him again and again, he couldn't be a hero. However, it was clear now more than ever that he could never rid himself of the quirkless boy. Deku had managed to wiggle his way back into Bakugo's life, and through one of the class extras nonetheless. Bakugo wanted nothing more than to get rid of the purple-haired girl and send her ashes to Deku in a box. However, her threat had been received loud and clear, and he hated it. He didn't understand why this was happening to him. He was the prized pupil. He had the ability to explode in the palm of his hand. He was the future #1 hero. Bakugo had just finished his quirk training, like the others, and was nursing his sore hands. On the outside, he looked calm, but on the inside, he was about to explode with frustration. He snapped out of his thoughts when he saw Kirishima walk through the door. Bakugo hated to admit it, but he missed his shitty hair. The two students' eyes met before Kirishima turned away and walked over to Siro and Mina. Other than praising him at the start of camp, Kirishima had pretty much ignored Bakugo the whole time. He'd go nowhere near him, as if Bakugo had done something terrible. Finally, Bakugo decided that enough was enough and stomped over to Kirishima. The red-haired boy turned in surprise at the new visitor but frowned once he recognized him. Bakugo scoffed at the attitude, grabbing Kirishima by his shirt and dragging him away from the group. Kirishima tried to shake him off, and eventually, Bakugo let go. "What the hell, Bakugo?" Kirishima exclaimed, stepping away. "Why are you avoiding me?" Bakugo snarled, causing Kirishima to raise an eyebrow. "We both know dim and well why," Kirishima said, crossing his arms. "Well, I sure as hell don't." Bakugo snapped back. "How about your green-haired friend?" Kirishima replied sarcastically. "He's not my friend," Bakugo snarled through gritted teeth. "Then what the hell is he?" Kirishima shot back. Bakugo froze. What was Deku to him? They weren't friends. Were they enemies? He wouldn't be surprised if Deku hated him for what he'd done. Bakugo stammered, trying to form a response. "Don't know." Kirishima looked at Bakugo with concern. "Bakugo, what did you do to him?" he asked seriously. Bakugo's eyes went wide as he remembered the moment. Deku's face draining of color, his world crumbling to dust, all done by Bakugo's hands. Bakugo's breathing started to pick up, his hands beginning to shake. All he could imagine was Izuku's face, broken and shattered. "Bakugo!" Kirishima's voice snapped him out of his panic. He saw Kirishima shaking him. "You okay, bro?" the red-haired boy asked, concern etched across his face. "Why, I'm fine, just. Please don't ask me about Deku," Bakugo pleaded. "But, please," Bakugo begged with desperate eyes. Kirishima sighed and nodded, before dragging Bakugo back to the building. "Come on, Baku bro, let's go back to camp," Kirishima said. Bakugo looked up at him and smiled. "Glad to have you back, shitty hair." I stared at my ceiling while I thought about last night. What caused Mom to act like that? And why was she saying sorry? Questions like these swam around in my head like a great white in a shark tank. We'd never really talked much, but I never thought it would affect her this badly. Mom had avoided me after last night, leaving for work before I woke up. I was honestly kind of hurt that she was going to such lengths to avoid me. I sat up from my bed and grabbed my guitar. I needed a distraction, and music seemed as good as any right now. I strummed the open strings and winced at the sound. I quickly tuned it before strumming again. The open strings sang like a bird, signaling it was ready to be played. I thought hard about what to play, stretching my fingers. After pondering for a minute, I decided and positioned my fingers. I remembered all the times I saw my friends mock my dreams, never taking my words seriously. I thought about my dad. I'd never seen him, and people used to bully me about it. Eventually, they succumbed to my quirklessness, but it still hurt. I thought to why I wanted to be a hero. I wanted to be All Might, but that reason seemed too shallow to warrant my determination. In the end, it didn't matter. Even when I went against All Might's words, I still failed. My mind drifted to my bullying. I practically encouraged it by being so vocal about my dream. Every time I'd pick myself back up again, but in the end, it was all useless. All that's left of myself were holes in my self-confidence. I looked at myself while singing. This was all that was left of me, a broken husk of the once bright boy I was. The thoughts caused me to strum heavily on the guitar, my emotions seeping through my words. My mind immediately sprang back to the voice. Its reappearance was unsettling and made me worry about my mental state. But I'm fine, right? I repeated the chorus, the words hitting harder each time. Once it was done, I calmed down and played the bridge. I imagined Bakugo before me, looking at me with his harsh eyes. I channeled my emotions through my voice and guitar, both translating my pain into music. For the final chorus, all the pain and suffering I'd endured weighed down on me heavily. I let out everything I had, pouring all my emotions into the song. And it was done. Before I even realized it, the song had reached its end, and I'd stopped strumming. I looked down at my fingertips, the force of the guitar strings evident on them. I placed the guitar down and sighed. Suddenly, my phone rang, distracting me from my thoughts. I fished it out of my pocket and opened it to see my mum calling. I quickly answered and held the phone to my ear. Hello. Hello dear, I was wondering if you could go out and get the groceries for dinner. Sure, what's this all about though? I asked. You usually get the shopping yourself after work. Well, work is taking longer than expected, she stated over the phone. I also think you were right last night, and I want us to have redo. My face lit up at her words. Everything was getting back on track now. Okay, sure. Send me the shopping list and I'll go get it. I replied in an excited tone. Sob, I froze at the sound. Mum was crying again. What? Are you okay? I questioned, listening attentively. Sniff, yes, I'm fine, Izuku. I'll send you the shopping list as soon as I can. I was still slightly concerned from the crying but figured I'd ask her when she got back. Okay, see you, Mum. Love you, I said, ready to hang up the phone. Yeah. With that, the call ended, and I looked at my phone in confusion. What was going on with my mum? She was clearly crying and seemed apprehensive throughout the call. I looked at the now-sent shopping list and grabbed my jumper. I'd get answers after dinner. I'd make sure of it. My ears were ringing. Mr. Aizawa had demanded I continuously pound my jacks into the cliff face to increase durability. It also didn't help that Bakugo was screaming every time he let off an explosion. In short, I was in agony. Ashido was right next to me, using her quirk to melt the cliff face. Her face was morphed into one of pure pain. Jirou. I turned around to see Mr. Aizawa standing with a bored expression on his face. You can stop for a bit. I have a new way to train your quirk, he said, shoving his hands into his pockets. I could feel Mina glaring at me as I detached my jacks from the cliff face. I've heard from the class that you have a new move, Aizawa stated, sounding bored. Oh yeah, I haven't named it yet, but I basically use my jacks as grappling hooks. I quickly responded, excited about the recognition. Aizawa nodded and took me over to Tsu. I want you to attach your jacks to the top of the cliff and attempt to climb it. I looked at Mr. Aizawa with a worried expression. I knew this was to strengthen my earlobes, but they were still slightly weak. If you feel as though they'll tear, disengage. The whole point of this is to strengthen them, not remove them, Aizawa reassured me. I nodded and extended my jacks as far as I could reach. Once I impaled them into the wall, I began to climb. There were ridges in the cliff face to help me grip, but I only used them when I felt I was putting too much tension on my ears. Hello, Jirou, Tsu exclaimed while climbing with me. That new move of yours is handy, isn't it? Yeah, shame I didn't think of it sooner. I responded, wincing at the strain on my ears. If you don't mind me asking, is your boyfriend okay? Sue asked, showing her curious side. Yeah. Why? I asked, a hint of defensiveness in my voice. He seemed rather quiet on the way back from the mall. I was wondering if anything went wrong. Sue responded, clearly not catching my tone. I thought back to the mall, remembering Izuku shaking and muttering. He was trying to put on a brave face, but he couldn't hide it from me. His sudden meeting with Bakugo had shaken him. I recalled how hard it was to get him to go to therapy, and how he had stopped taking his medication. I was beginning to wish he still had it. I looked back at Sue, forcing a smile. Don't worry, Sue, everything's fine. Aizu is fine. Sue looked at me for a moment before continuing with her exercise. As I continued mine, I knew one thing I wished wasn't true. Aizu's not fine. After what felt like an eternity, the training eventually ended, only for us to be thrown into cooking for each other. I was really starting to dislike this camp. After a lot of complaining, we finished and began eating like we hadn't eaten in years. I saw Kirishima and Bakugo talking as usual, so I assumed they had made up. It was no secret that I disliked Bakugo, but Kirishima seemed to be mellowing him out, so who was I to complain? I was going to join Yamamo until I noticed Koda walking off without his food. Normally, I would have shrugged it off, but Aizu's influence was rubbing off on me, so I followed him. My curiosity led me to Koda sitting atop a cliff, with a clear view over the area. I knew Koda had an attitude, and Mandalay had told me about his difficult past. I even sympathized with him a little, as I could understand his thought process. Hey, I eventually called out, causing Koda to turn around. How'd you find this place? He yelled angrily. I raised an eyebrow at his attitude. Calm down, I'm bringing you food since you clearly need it, I said nonchalantly. I'm fine. I don't need any, he snapped. I don't want to hang out with any of you wannabe heroes. Get out of my secret hideout. I smirked at his response. Secret hideout, huh? I said with a grin. While he tried to act edgy and mature, he was still just a kid. Shut up, he replied, clearly annoyed by my grin. Go show off your stupid powers with your dumb quirk somewhere else. My smile faltered at his words. Was that what he thought we were doing? We're not training our quirks to show off, Koda, I said seriously. We're training our quirks to be heroes. Koda snarled at my words and turned away. Quirks, this and quirks, that, it's all anyone ever talks about, he spat, walking away to distance himself from me. Everyone's crazy calling each other stupid names like hero and villain and killing each other. It's not just heroes, I thought to myself. Koda hates quirks as well. Just like your parents, huh? I said sympathetically. Koda turned around in shock. Did Mandalay tell you? He yelled angrily. Yeah, my boyfriend was a fan of your parents, I replied. Teach they died because they were showing off their dumb quirks, just like all you stupid heroes. Koda yelled. I thought of Aizu and how he would respond to Koda. You know, my boyfriend was born without a quirk, I said calmly. Huh? Koda said, confused. He really wanted to be a hero and tried everything to get a quirk, but nothing worked, I said sadly, remembering Aizu's past. In the end, he never got to be a hero since you can't be a hero without a quirk in this society. I leaned against the side of the cliff. There's a lot of ways to think about quirks, but if you reject them that much, it will only make it more painful for you. Just shut up. Koda yelled angrily, causing me to wince from the sudden noise. Get out of here. I sighed at the kid's stubbornness and left the curry on the floor. I'll leave the curry here, let me know when you're more willing to talk. The next day was back to training again, and I felt exhausted. My earlobes felt like they were about to snap off at any moment. Eventually, the sun set, and under the cover of night, the test of courage began. It's time for the test of courage. Mina celebrated with enthusiasm. However, Mr. Aizawa had something else to say about it. Before that, it pains me to say this, but the extra lessons group will be having class with me now, our insomniac teacher said, ruining Mina's celebration. Mina froze before bursting into anger. You've got to be kidding me, she screamed as Aizawa dragged the group back to the camp. After witnessing Mr. Aizawa dragging the poor souls into the forest, We all drew lots to determine our partners. I was partnered with Kaminari, while poor Ojiro was left on his own. After a couple of groups had gone through, it was our turn. We walked in silence for about a minute before Kaminari decided to break it. You know, that new move you got is really starting to separate you from everyone else, he said, causing me to look at him in confusion. What do you mean? I asked, slightly puzzled. Well, the class kinda got split into two groups in terms of power, with people like Bakugo, Todoroki, and Tokoyami being on top. He explained, you used to be with the rest of us, but that new move kinda got you able to bridge the gap. I looked away, a slight blush creeping onto my cheeks at all the praise. Oh come on, it's not that good, I said, looking away. Kaminari seemed to perk up at my reaction, reminding me of what Aizu told me before I left. Deciding to ask about his feelings, I looked at Kaminari. Hey Jammy, is that smoke? I was cut off as Kaminari pointed at the smoke filling the sky. Oh no! I exclaimed in shock. Suddenly, a voice sprang into our heads. Everyone! We're being attacked by two villains. It's possible that there are more. Mandalay's voice informed us. Everyone who can move, get back to camp immediately. If you can hear this, Koda, please do as I say. I froze at Koda's name. He's not with them? I thought. I suddenly remembered his hiding spot and knew that I was the only one who knew where he was. Kaminari! I shouted, grabbing his attention. Run back to camp, I'm going to get Koda. I know where he is. I immediately ran off, ignoring Kaminari shouting after me. Please be safe, Koda. Koda was terrified. Right in front of him was the figure of his parents' murderer, looming over him like a mountain. His breathing was erratic and his legs shook. He had tried to run away, but the figure was too fast. All he could do was stare in terror as the man's arms swung down towards him. Papa! Mama! Koda cried out as he looked at the fist heading straight for him. Suddenly, he felt something wrap around him, pulling him out of the way. Koda turned to see Jirou standing there, not taking her eyes off the attacker for a second. You okay, Koda? Jirou asked while stepping in front of him. Why? Was all the little boy could reply as the now-revealed villain eyed his new opponent. Who are you? Muscular demanded. You're not on the list. Don't get in my way, you weakling. Jirou continued to glare at the villain. On the outside, she looked calm and confident, but on the inside, she was panicking. That guy just created a shockwave with one punch. How am I supposed to deal with that? Jirou screamed at herself while trying to control her heart rate. She looked back at Koda and saw how terrified he was. No, I can't think like that. Jirou mentally reprimanded herself. Don't worry, Koda, she exclaimed, readying herself for battle. I'll definitely save you. The villain laughed at her words, allowing muscle to envelop his arm. You'll definitely save him? That sounds like something a hero would say. The blonde giant stated menacingly. Don't tell me you're the kind to show up everywhere talking about justice. He glared at the petite hero in training. Jirou maintained her glare at the mountain of a man before her. Her legs were shaking and she was sweating, but she stood her ground. Well, let's see if you can back up those words, he spat with a manic grin, throwing his cloak to the side. Suddenly, he leapt at Jirou at super speed, almost striking her in the process. The purple-haired girl dodged and quickly used her jacks to grapple out of the way. Don't dodge, complained Muscular. You said you'd save the kid, right? Jirou's eyes widened as she realized how close Muscular was to Koda. She sprang into action and fired her jacks at her opponent. They pierced his muscle, causing him to raise an eyebrow. Was that supposed to do something? He questioned mockingly. Jirou responded by pumping her exhilarated heart rate into him, causing him to cry out in pain. She quickly detached her jacks and reached for Koda, desperate to pull him out of harm's way. However, Muscular had other ideas. He grasped Jirou's jacks and swung her into the wall. The wall cracked on impact, causing Jirou to cry out in pain. Muscular wore a deranged smile as he approached the injured teen. I take it back, kid. Maybe you're not a weakling. Maybe you're strong. Jirou groaned at the pain, only to see Muscular swinging his fist at her. With no chance to dodge, Jirou placed her arms out to block. It proved futile, as she was sent spiraling to the right with a broken arm. Jirou held her arm in agony at its twisted state. "Come on," the exhilarated blonde yelled. "Keep fighting. Things are starting to get pretty good." As Jirou began to get up, Muscular dealt a devastating kick, breaking ribs and sending her crashing into the wall again. "What did you say earlier?" Muscular questioned. "That you'd definitely save him? Look where that's gotten you." Jirou looked up to see Koda watching her, terrified. She wanted to just lay down. She was exhausted, and it was clear she wasn't going to win this battle. However, as she wallowed in despair, a memory with Izuku entered her mind. Flashback. Midoriya and Jirou were at Takoba Municipal Beach, with Jirou looking as though she was going to drop at any moment. Izuku was giving her motivation as she dragged a broken microwave out of the pile. "Come on, Jirou, you're so close," the green teen called out, before Jirou collapsed. "Ugh!" Jirou cried out in frustration. "This is never going to be done." Okay, don't worry. We'll take a break," Midoriya comforted, as Jirou flopped onto the golden sand. She turned her head to him and groaned. "Let's just give up, Midoriya. This is impossible, we're never going to get this beach clear." Her green-haired friend frowned. "Really, Jirou? Are you forgetting what you told me at our results?" Jirou turned to Midoriya, confused, before remembering her promise. She had seen Midoriya's broken face at his failure and promised to become the greatest hero for both of them. Jirou laid her head onto the sand with a sigh. "No," she sighed as Midoriya nodded. "In my eyes, the greatest hero would be able to clean up this beach, wouldn't you agree?" he questioned, receiving a grumble in reply from Jirou. "A true hero never gives up, even if a task seems impossible," Midoriya exclaimed, his voice filled with emotion. Jirou turned her head and looked at the determined boy. Whether it's an unbeatable villain or a beach within human levels of trash, Midoriya started with determination. A hero never gives up. Jirou finished with a smile before getting to her feet. End of flashback. "No," Jirou silently declared, struggling to get up. "I'm going to win this battle and save Koda." She steadily got to 1 foot, shaking, before finally standing tall. She was bleeding from the head, and her right arm was twisted and broken. Jirou stood defiantly in front of the surprised Muscular, sending a jack into the wall and swinging at him. "Because that's what heroes do," she cried out as she planted her foot heavily on the blonde's face, kicking his artificial eye off. Not giving him time to recover, Jirou detached her jack and sent both into Muscular's chest. The vibrations weakened his muscles, allowing Jirou to stab her jacks into him and send vibrations through his body. Muscular cried out in agony but backhanded Jirou away. However, she ignored the pain and continued her assault, her jacks stabbing into his body, sending vibrations all around him. However, Muscular fought through the pain, stepping down onto Jirou. Jirou cried out, her recently broken ribs screaming in agony. In desperation, she sent her jack into his good eye, causing him to roar in pain. Jirou tried to escape, but Muscular grasped onto her in anger. He began to increase his muscle mass, crushing Jirou under his weight. She desperately stabbed her jacks at him, but it proved useless as he piled more weight on. Jirou struggled to breathe as Muscular's pressure intensified. "I'm sorry, Izu," she thought as everything began to fade to black. Suddenly, her near-death experience was interrupted by a giant explosion, sending Muscular flying. As Jirou gasped for air, she turned her head towards her savior, only to find the last person she expected. Bakugo! Eijiro Kirishima was conflicted. He had reconciled somewhat with Bakugo, but he felt unsatisfied not knowing what was happening between him and Midoriya. He wanted to understand his friend's actions, but he didn't want to hurt Bakugo. It was clear from Bakugo's reaction that he felt guilty about something. Kirishima wanted to help Bakugo improve. Part of the reason he valued their friendship was Bakugo's strength, but he was also aware of his flaws. Kirishima spotted Bakugo and swallowed his guilt. "Yo, Baku bro," he called out. "I need to talk to you for a bit." Bakugo let out a teach, but eventually walked over. "What do you want, shitty hair?" he asked. Kirishima sighed, knowing it would be hard to persuade Bakugo to open up. I want you to tell me about you and Midoriya, he demanded, earning a growl from Bakugo. I thought I told you to leave it, shitty hair. Bakugo snarled. Kirishima stood his ground. Bakugo, it's clear whatever happened is affecting both of you, he stated, earning a grunt from Bakugo. I won't judge you, I just want to help. Bullshit. Bakugo shouted, causing Kirishima to jump. Bakugo seemed to calm down slightly before speaking again. If you knew what happened between us, he started, his hair shadowing his eyes. You would look at me differently. Kirishima's eyes widened. Is it really that bad? He asked, earning a nod from Bakugo. Kirishima sighed, realizing that if it was truly serious, Bakugo would never share. Bakugo, Kirishima finally spoke, how do you view a hero? Bakugo's eyes widened slightly before he snarled, what does that matter? Kirishima rolled his eyes. Just answer the question. Bakugo made a tch noise but reluctantly replied, a hero is someone who never loses, who crushes their enemies, no matter how strong they are. Kirishima's eyes widened at Bakugo's words. It made sense why Bakugo wanted to be the #1 hero. He wanted to be the strongest. In that case, would you describe whatever you did to Midoriya as heroic? Kirishima asked, causing Bakugo to raise an eyebrow in confusion. What are you talking about, shitty hair? Bakugo questioned. Kirishima sighed, knowing he was close to getting through to Bakugo. Would All Might do what you did? Bakugo froze. Confusion crossed his face, but a moment later, the color drained from it. He tilted his head down as Kirishima watched with a grim expression. The memories of his words and actions haunted him. Kirishima wanted to intervene but knew Bakugo needed this moment. As Bakugo shakily looked up, tears streamed down his face. The thought of All Might filled his mind. All Might would never do what he did to Midoriya, and All Might was the strongest hero. Bakugo looked at Kirishima, his expression one of deep regret. What have I done? He murmured. Kirishima walked over and enveloped him in a hug, Bakugo grasping him tightly. After a few moments of silence, they pulled apart. What am I going to do? Bakugo stammered. I've ruined his life, I can't be a hero. Kirishima shook his head, causing Bakugo to raise an eyebrow in confusion. You can still be a hero, it just depends on what you do now, the manly teen said with a kind smile. A true hero wouldn't dwell on their mistakes, they'd try to fix them. Bakugo's eyes widened at his friend's words. From now on, if you truly want to be the strongest hero, learn from your mistakes, no matter how bad they are. Kirishima smiled, pleased that he had finally gotten through to the blonde. Bakugo nodded shakily, a small smile forming. Thanks, Kirishima, he said before walking off. Just before he disappeared from view, he turned around. Don't think I'm always gonna be this nice though. You here? He shouted into the distance. Kirishima chuckled, feeling a sense of triumph. While he hadn't gotten all the answers he wanted, he had helped his friend, and that was enough for him. 2 hours later, Bakugo and Todoroki were walking through the forest, one with a stoic expression and the other with irritation. They had already dealt with a few traps set by the opposing class, with only one of them eliciting a reaction. Why'd I have to get stuck with you? Bakugo complained, glancing sideways, trying to restrain himself from calling Todoroki extra. I'm not overly fond of this pairing either, Todoroki replied in his usual emotionless voice. Before Bakugo could snap back, a voice interrupted them. Everyone! We're being attacked by 2 villains, it's possible there are more. Mandalay's voice rang out. Everyone who can move, get back to camp immediately. If you can hear this, Koda, please do as I say. Todoroki tensed at the news, while Bakugo struggled to contain a grin. Even though he had promised to be better, his battle instincts were still strong. Come on, let's make our way back to camp, Todoroki insisted, earning a growl from Bakugo. I ain't gonna do as it. The Pomeranian was cut off as Kaminari burst through the bushes. The two fell into battle positions but relaxed when they recognized him. Don't scare me like that, you damn plug socket. Bakugo snarled, then sighed in relief. Oh thank God! Kaminari exclaimed, nearly crying at the sight of them. Todoroki noticed Kaminari's panic and asked, "Weren't you with Jirou?" Kaminari perked up at the name, his expression shifting to panic. "She ran off to save Koda. She told me to tell everyone and just swung away," he cried out. Bakugo snorted at the predicament, but Kirishima's words echoed in his mind. A true hero wouldn't dwell on their mistakes, they'd try to fix them. He knew Jirou was Midoriya's girlfriend and that Midoriya needed her safe more than anything. He had to start caring about people, especially the one he had hurt the most. Gritting his teeth, he turned to Kaminari. "Which direction?" he asked through clenched teeth. Todoroki looked at Bakugo in surprise, while Kaminari appeared confused. "What?" he asked. "Which way did she go?" Bakugo snapped, losing his patience. Kaminari made an eep noise before quickly pointing into the forest. "Icy hot, take Kaminari back to camp," Bakugo ordered before blasting off in the direction Kaminari indicated. Ignoring their shouts, he traversed the forest. This was it, his first step toward redemption. He just hoped he wasn't too late. "Bakugo?" I exclaimed in shock at the sight of him. Yeah, don't make a big deal about this or I'll never live it down," he growled, while I checked to see if I was hallucinating. I slowly got to my feet and noticed Koda behind Bakugo, shaking. "That won't keep him down," I said, gripping my ribs. As if to prove my words, Muscular groaned and got to his feet. "You pack a punch, kid," he said with a manic grin. "But the girl's right, it'll take more than that to take me down." Bakugo clicked his tongue in annoyance. "What's his quirk?" he asked, laser-focused. "He can grow extra muscle," I replied, not breaking eye contact with the looming villain. "Now that I think of it, you're the kid on the list," Muscular exclaimed, showing a terrifying grin. "I came here to fight, so I don't care what those BSRs want." He edged closer and I prepared to dodge, knowing how strong he was. "Show me your blood," the fighting maniac demanded, breaking the standoff by leaping toward us. I rolled to the side, and an explosion from Bakugo confirmed he had also dodged. Spotting an opening, I sent my fist into his knee, pumping my heartbeat into it. The musclehead cried out in pain, falling to one knee. As if reading my mind, Bakugo barreled in and sent an explosion at the brute. As much as I despised Bakugo, I knew that if we wanted to survive and save Koda, we would have to work together. Muscular growled as he got up. "That was a dirty trick. Working together is cheating," he screamed, sounding like an angry child. This time, Muscular leapt into the air, smashing the ground with all his might. I immediately wrapped one jack around Koda and the other towards the top of the cliff face, launching us out of the blast radius. I extended my jack to move Koda out of the way before swinging towards Muscular. Bakugo was already sending explosions at him, but Muscular was swatting them away like they were nothing. I began to distract him, sending kicks and swinging out of the way. This seemed to irritate Muscular enough to pounce at me. "There's dodge," Bakugo warned, as we both spotted the looming tower of muscle barreling towards me. I sent my jack out of the way and grappled aside just as Muscular smashed into the mountain face. Seeing an opportunity, I sent both my jacks into his back and pulled myself towards him while sending my heartbeat into him. I'd been thinking about a name for this new style all camp, but once I attached to the villain, I knew what to call it. New style, cord capture. I screamed at the top of my lungs before landing on the brute. Once I landed, I pumped my heartbeat harder than I'd ever done before. My ears felt like they were going to tear off, but I couldn't let go, not yet. Muscular was screaming at the vibrations but was still hanging on. I tore my eyes off the villain and looked down to see Bakugo standing there in shock. "Get off your lazy butt and finish this," I shouted at him, causing his eyes to widen. Muscular was trying to grab me, but I was just out of his reach. I looked back at my enemy and continued to pump my heartbeat, ignoring the searing pain in my earlobes. I could feel the vibrations from Bakugo's explosions as he grew closer. The smell of smoke was getting stronger. "Howitzer impact," the blonde cried out, before sending an enormous explosion towards Muscular. I quickly jacked away once the explosion made impact and swung to the floor, before relaxing. Muscular barreled towards the ground, causing it to break under his weight. Bakugo landed next to me, holding his hand in pain. We stared at Muscular for a couple of seconds before realizing he was finally unconscious. I looked at Koda and found him staring at us in disbelief. "You okay?" I questioned him, earning a slow nod. I sighed with relief before turning to Bakugo. "You heard him right?" I asked. "They're after you." Bakugo let out a th. "I'd like to see them try. I'll kick their butt," he replied, making me roll my eyes at his overconfident nature. "Either way, we've got to get you to Aizawa," I stated, expecting a cocky comeback. However, to my shock, I was met with no pushback. "Fine," Bakugo agreed, earning a gasp from me. "Did you hit your head fighting that guy?" I questioned, confused at his less aggressive attitude. "What's that supposed to mean?" he demanded, proving my theory wrong. I shook my head and wrapped a jack around Koda. "Doesn't matter, let's go." Jirou's POV. I hate this day. Everyone's talking about love and crushes, and I just sit to the side having to put up with it. You'd think I'd love it due to being with Izuku, but honestly, it made the day worse. While I do hate the day, I was always jealous of people getting confessions in their lockers. I'd given plenty of confessions before, but I'd never received one myself. Since Izuku didn't get to go to UA, we couldn't do this tradition. I always scolded myself for wanting something so trivial, but you can't help what the heart wants. "Hey Jirou, you got a crush?" I was pulled out of my thoughts by my overly enthusiastic friend, Mina. It was no secret how much of a fan of gossip she was, so it wasn't surprising that today made her this excited. It was near the end of the day, with the other girls going off for Summerleton and me being left with Mina for the last stretch. I sighed and shook my head. "Nah, no one you'd know, Mina," I dismissed, not thinking too much of what I'd said. However, when I heard the gossip queen gasp, I knew I had messed up. Wait. You have a crush?" she screeched, making my ears want to strangle her. "And no, of course not," I replied, cursing myself for stammering. "Ah, you're blushing. Who's it? I'm sure I'll know them somehow." I shook my head and looked out the window, my cheeks flushed. "Doesn't matter, besides even if you did, why would I tell you?" I questioned. Mina just looked away and pouted, before smiling at the arrival of the other girls in the class. "Hey guys," Mina greeted. "Got any juicy Valentine's Day secrets?" I zoned out of their conversation, rolling my eyes at the occasional lovey story. Another reason I despised Valentine's Day was my bad history with it. In my previous school years, I'd had many crushes that turned sour when I gave them love letters. I was the tomboy of the school, and nobody liked me. Due to this, I'd learned to despise this day, as it had been nothing but bad experiences. I'd told Izuku about my history with this, and he'd promised that he'd make this day one to remember. I had a slither of hope that this time would be different, but not too much. I didn't want to get hurt again. I knew that Aizu was a sweetheart who would never treat me wrong, but I was worried about him being busy or something getting in the way. After an exhausting lesson, we were finally dismissed, and the day was done. I went to leave the classroom, eager to escape and get the day over with. However, to my dismay, a certain electricity user decided to strike up a conversation with me. "Hey Jirou, I was wondering if you'd want to go get a bite to eat with me after school?" The blonde stammered nervously, a subtle blush across his face. "Sorry, Kaminari, I can't. I'm spending the rest of the day with a friend," I replied a little too bluntly. He seemed to droop at my words before covering it up with a goofy smile. "Oh, okay. I'll try again some other day," he said, obviously slightly disheartened. "Yeah, sure. See ya," I said, leaving the classroom and exiting the school. After an entertaining journey home with good music, I made my way to my room and flopped on my. My parents were out on a Valentine's Day date, so I was home alone. After a minute of lying face down on my bed, I felt a notification on my phone go off. Groaning at the interruption, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and turned it on. "Aizu, I'm going to need a little more time to get everything ready. I hope that's okay." I sighed, texting back a thumbs up before turning off my phone. After that, the day passed irritatingly slowly. It felt like every hour dragged on like a century. It was already getting dark, and I was still glaring at my phone, waiting for it to ring. After another half hour of waiting, my phone rang. I immediately pounced on it, but my eagerness slipped away when I found out it was just an app notification. In irritation, I threw my phone onto my bed and stormed out of my room into the living room. I decided to pick up my dad's guitar and started strumming, trying to distract myself from my growing frustration. This strumming turned into a full-blown jam session, with me playing any song that came to mind. After finishing the final song, I stopped, suddenly remembering the date. Cursing under my breath, I scampered up the stairs in panic. I had gotten so into the music that I completely forgot about the date. I quickly ran to my bed and searched for my phone, only to find it stuck in the crack down the side of the bed. I shoved my arm down the tiny crevice, hoping my phone wasn't out of reach. "Come on. Come on." I cried in frustration before my fingertips grazed the phone. I pushed it against the wall and slowly slid it up into my hand. I immediately switched it on and, to my dismay, found a bunch of missed calls and texts from Izu. I had been playing guitar for at least an hour, so who knows how long it had been since Izu texted that he was ready. "Izuku, hey. Violet, sorry for the wait, I'm ready now." "Izuku, it's at Mustafa Park in case you didn't know." "Izuku, Kyo, it's been 30 minutes since I texted. Is everything alright?" "Izuku, if this is about me making you wait, then I'm sorry. I promise I won't make you wait next Valentine's Day." "Izuku, I'm still at the park. I'll be here for another 20 minutes before I leave. I'm sorry for making you wait. I'll make it up to you." Reading each message cracked my heart a little more. I immediately replied, telling him I was sorry and that I was on my way. But the messages weren't going through, indicating he either had no signal or his phone was dead. I looked at the last message and the time, freezing at when it was sent. Sheet. That was 15 minutes ago. I cried out in shock before bolting out of my room. I hadn't changed out of my UA uniform and was a sweaty mess, but I couldn't miss my first genuine Valentine's Day. I quickly locked the door behind me and sprinted down the street. The park was a 10-minute walk, so I had to sprint harder than ever to make it in under 5 minutes. I dashed past people, shouting apologies as I went. However, in my frantic sprint, I failed to spot a lemonade stand in front of me. I tripped over the table, and sticky lemonade splashed all over me. "What the hell, you jerk?" I heard a little kid cry, kicking my leg with his small feet. "Sorry." I apologized, fishing out my spare cash and slamming it on the table. Not even waiting for a reply, I broke back into my sprint and checked my watch. Sheet. I cried out in frustration as I saw the time. I wasn't going to make it. Deciding to take a shortcut, I ran through someone's garden, earning a "hey" before leaping over their fence. I did this for another 2 gardens, one of them involving a group in a hot tub. However, when I leapt over the last fence, I checked my watch again. I hadn't cut that much time, but it was enough. I had about a minute before Isa left, and luckily I could see the park. I quickly made my way through the gate and looked around eagerly for my green-haired sweetheart, managing to spot him packing up under a tree. "Gotcha!" I exclaimed in hope, before quickly running over to my boyfriend. "Izu!" I called out, causing him to turn around in surprise. "Kyo? I thought you weren't coming," he questioned, noticing my less than stellar appearance. "What happened to you? Are you okay?" He quickly switched to the caring and loving doofus I knew. "Nothing, just a bit of a spillage from some brats," I dismissed, giving Izu an apologetic look. "Greenie, I am so sorry for taking so long. At first, I was irritated about you taking so long, so I threw my phone down the side of the bed and played guitar, but I lost track of time, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. I was cut off by a hug from Izu, causing me to jump before snuggling into his embrace. "I'm glad you're here," he comforted, ignoring the sticky feeling coming off of me. Izuku broke off from the hug and opened his bag, pulling out a blanket. "You really do love picnics, don't you?" I teased, earning a smirk from Izu. "Are you complaining?" he retorted, causing me to giggle. "Never," I replied, kissing his cheek before dragging him down next to me on the blanket. The picnic was amazing. Most would complain about it being at night, but I adored it. The stars were shining like dazzling diamonds, gazing down at Izu and me. Aiza gave me his chocolate, which was in the shape of a musical note. Needless to say, I loved it. After a while of eating and laughing, we were left with a comfortable silence, staring up at the stars. Kyo! Aizu called, holding my hand. I hummed and looked at him. Happy Valentine's Day, he said with an appealing smile. Smiling back, I brought him into a kiss. As our lips met, in the corner of my eye, I spotted a shooting star fly past. Best Valentine's Day ever. Izuku was currently curled up in a ball in the corner of the kitchen. It's your fault, a voice spat at him. You did this. Please stop, Izuku stammered, tears streaming down his face. Look at your stuttering, you're pathetic. A waste of space. A quirkless piece of trash. Not even worth the dirt on my shoe. The only right you have is to die. Izuku shook his head and rocked back and forth with his knees pressed against his nose. Kyo, he muttered, desperately trying to ignore the voices. Please hurry back. Die! Jirou flinched at the loud noise while avoiding the sharp swords coming from the villain's mouth. Jirou and Bakugo had dropped Koda with Aizawa and gone to help the others. While Aizawa initially demanded they return to camp for safety, he eventually relented when Jirou persuaded him that they needed to help. This led them to delivering a message to Mandalay from Aizawa and eventually running into this strange villain. Bakugo! Get back! Todoroki demanded while blocking the dangerous teeth with his ice. Don't tell me what to do! Bakugo retorted, exploding back towards the villain. Todoroki shook his head and turned to Jirou. Jirou, go get some help. Your quirk doesn't work well against this villain. As much as Jirou wanted to argue, she knew Todoroki had a point. All it would take is one stray sharp tooth, and her jacks would be severed. Jirou nodded to Todoroki and ran back into the forest, focusing her ears for any sounds of classmates. Jirou's search went a little too well, as she jumped at the sound of an ominous roar. What the hell is that? Jirou muttered to herself before deciding to head towards the noise. As she got closer, she started to hear yells from someone else. Dark Shadow! Please calm down. Tokoyami's voice cried out, causing Jirou's eyes to widen. That roar was Dark Shadow? What happened? Tokoyami usually has a lot of power over him. Jirou thought, recalling how everyone in the class realized Tokoyami's weakness was light after Bakugo's battle. Obviously, the dark area of a forest at night would give Dark Shadow more power than he could control. Stealing her nerves, Jirou continued to sprint towards the roar until she could see the true power of the beast. Dark Shadow was enormous, knocking down trees left and right with his size alone. In the middle was Tokoyami, crying while desperately pleading for his quirk to calm down. Jirou, over here. The purple-haired girl turned towards the voice and spotted Shoji waving at her. Jirou sneaked over to her multiple-limbed classmate, successfully evading the dark monstrosity before her. Shoji, what is going on with Tokoyami? Jirou questioned, the adrenaline making her slightly more aggressive than usual. We were attacked by villains, and Tokoyami lost control. Shoji revealed. Jirou noticed his missing limb and gasped. Shoji, your arm. It's fine, it won't impede me in any way, Shoji interrupted, earning a sigh of relief from Jirou. Do you have a plan for how to deal with this? Shoji asked, raising an eyebrow. Why are you asking me? ISCK at making plans, Jirou replied. Recently, you've been getting ahead of the rest of the class, so I assumed you'd have a plan for this situation. Jirou rubbed her nape while looking away. I've had help, I'm not really responsible, she dismissed, earning a raised eyebrow from Shoji. Whether or not you've had help, it was your willingness and strength that improved you, Shoji insisted. And besides, everybody needs help every now and then. Jirou looked up at the masked student and smiled. Thanks, Shoji, she replied, before focusing back on the situation. Jirou pondered how to deal with their predicament, scanning her mind for any information that could help. Tokoyami's weakness was light, she just needed a way to utilize it. She also needed to get help for Bakugo and Todoroki, and Shoji wouldn't be enough to face the formidable villain. Then it clicked. I've got a plan, she exclaimed. Bakugo and Todoroki are fighting a villain. Jirou explained, pointing in the direction she came from. If we lead Tokoyami towards them, he can handle the villain, and they can use their quirks to calm him down. Shoji nodded in approval. Very well, get ready to run. Jirou smirked and prepared herself. Go! She shouted, sprinting with Shoji out of the bushes. Over here, my chemical romance. Jirou called out, smirking at her own nickname. Dark Shadow roared in response, signaling that they had caught his attention. The pair began to dodge and weave through bushes and trees, narrowly escaping the beast's claws. Bakugo's explosions became audible, signaling that they were close. We're almost there. Jirou yelled, urging Shoji forward. However, Dark Shadow was closing in quickly. It had gotten to the point where Jirou could make out the dual-haired boy and the bombastic blonde. They were so close, and Jirou's plan seemed to be working. But fate didn't always play fair. Shoji gasped as he tripped over a tree root and fell to the ground. He looked up, trembling at the sight of the towering beast before him. Jirou felt as though everything was happening in slow motion. Shoji's wide eyes, Dark Shadow's open jaws, her extended jack. Acting quickly, Jirou's jack grasped onto Shoji's torso. Her earlobes screamed in agony at the pain of moving such a muscular teen, but she ignored it. With all her might, Jirou sent Shoji flying towards their fellow students, while accidentally propelling herself into Dark Shadow with the momentum. Jirou didn't have time to think before she found herself in the beast's mouth. She gasped and uttered one word, "No." And with that, the beast's jaws closed. Shoji stood still, processing what had just transpired. Jirou had pushed him out of the way and had just been engulfed by Dark Shadow. They didn't know whether she was safe or if Dark Shadow could even harm her, but they knew they had to get her out. Todoroki, use your quirk. Shoji screamed, grabbing the dual-haired boy's attention. Shoji? What happened? Todoroki questioned, blocking the villain's knives with his ice. Dark Shadow just ate Jirou. You need to get her out, he shouted, earning gasps from both Todoroki and Bakugo. Todoroki was about to ignite his left side when Bakugo stopped him. Wait a minute, we still have that villain to deal with. You want me to leave Jirou to die? Todoroki snapped back, causing Bakugo to growl. We need to take out that guy first, or we'll all be in trouble. Bakugo snarled. Todoroki didn't want to admit it, but Bakugo was right. They were losing the battle and couldn't hold out much longer. Shoji, lead Dark Shadow over here. Todoroki shouted, earning a nod from Shoji. The purple beast roared as the multi-limbed student led him towards the villains. And meet. The villains mumbled as Tokoyami got closer. However, his reaction changed drastically when he realized that his knives were breaking against Dark Shadow's skin. The villain shrieked as Dark Shadow ominously roared and sent him flying back into a tree, his weapons shattering in the process. Now, Todoroki! Bakugo exclaimed, earning a nod from Todoroki. Todoroki unleashed his flames, illuminating the forest and causing Dark Shadow to shrink. In the process, the quirk spat Jirou out, and she fell to the ground with a thud. To Shoji and Todoroki's surprise, Bakugo ran over and frantically checked on Jirou. Ears, wake up, the fiery student shouted. Shoji put 2 fingers to her neck and sighed with relief when he felt her heartbeat. She's alive, just unconscious, Shoji revealed, earning a sigh of relief from the other boys. They were snapped out of their relief by the sound of a whimper. They turned and saw Tokoyami, curled up against a tree with tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, he muttered. Shoji walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. Jirou's fine, don't worry. She just fainted from the shock. It doesn't matter, she almost died and it was all because of me. Bakugo marched over with a teeth. Ears led you over to us to help, not to give you a therapy session, Bakugo said, irritation on his face. You want to make amends? Then start by helping us get her back to camp. Tokoyami shakily nodded and got to his feet. What direction is the camp? Todoroki questioned, earning a shrug from everyone. I think it's that way. Shoji suggested. Well, your guess is as good as ours, Todoroki replied. Since Bakugo is their target, we should have him in the middle as we walk, Tokoyami suggested, still shaken from the recent ordeal. Everyone nodded in agreement, with Bakugo simply responding with a "tsh." The group began to head towards Shoji's suggested route, surrounding Bakugo, with Shoji carrying Jirou on his back. However, they were oblivious to a certain magician overlooking them with a mischievous grin. "It's almost too easy," he muttered as he reached out to activate his quirk. He was swiftly interrupted by a scarf-like weapon wrapping around him and pulling him back. The group looked up at the commotion to see their teacher pull the villain towards him and kick him to the ground. "You okay?" the teacher questioned, with slightly more empathy than the group expected. Yeah," Shoji answered, "but Jirou's unconscious." Aizawa sighed and rubbed his eyes. "You really are becoming a problem child," he muttered, before beckoning for the students to follow him. "You're heading in the wrong direction. The camp is this way," Aizawa explained. "I assume you heard Mandalay's message, right?" The group nodded, earning a grunt of approval. "Then you know we have to get Bakugo back to camp immediately." Bakugo let out another "tsh," but didn't object while the others simply nodded. After a short walk, the students and teacher found themselves in a clearing. "You see that light?" Aizawa questioned. "That's where the remedial studies were being held. Head there and you'll be safe." "Where are you going?" Todoroki asked. "There's still students trapped in the woods. I need to help them." Aizawa quickly leapt back into the forest, leaving the students to walk into the building. After walking through the building, they eventually heard the voices of their classmates and headed in that direction. The door swung open, and Vlad King opened it aggressively, preparing to attack the group. "Wait, it's just us," Shoji exclaimed, while the rest of the group readied themselves for combat. "I see. Glad to see you're okay," the now calm teacher responded. The group made their way into class and were met with a certain manly student. "You guys are okay?" Kirishima exclaimed. "We were so worried," Mina added, especially as Kaminari was the only one we'd seen come back. The blonde student peeked to the side of the group and widened his eyes at Jirou's state. "Oh no! What happened to Jirou?" he exclaimed frantically, running over to Shoji to help him put her down. "Me and Ears fought a strong opponent," Bakugo grumbled. "Dark shadow engulfed her in the eternal abyss," Tokoyami solemnly added, his head hanging with shame. Jirou's POV. "I flinched as I felt the sun's rays beat down against my eyelids. My eyelids fluttered open, and I took in my surroundings. I was in a hospital, covered in bandages with an 4-tube attached to my wrist. The last thing I could remember was the forest, so I had no idea how I got here. Then it hit me. Dark shadow, the villains, the attack." My eyes widened as I frantically looked around for any of my classmates, and to my relief, I found one. Lying peacefully on my bed was Denki Kaminari. I almost didn't want to wake him since he looked so comfortable, but I needed to know that everyone was fine. Jamming yay. "Kaminari, get up," I said while shaking the blonde idiot. 5 more minutes, mum," the blonde murmured, earning a tick mark on my forehead. "Oi dummus, wake the hell up," I yelled, irritated at his insistence on sleeping. The electric quirk user sprang up with a yelp and quickly checked his surroundings before his eyes landed on me. "Jirou, you're okay," he cried, before grasping me suddenly. I awkwardly patted his back as he squeezed me tightly. After about a minute of awkward hugging, I pushed him off me and finally got to talking. "What happened at camp? Is everyone okay?" I questioned. "Everyone's fine. A couple of us are unconscious, but we're mostly unscathed," Kaminari revealed, making me sigh with relief. "If anything, you got the worst of it, though. You had the most injuries, and they were worried about your ears." I brushed my earlobes while Kaminari talked about my injuries, feeling how stretched and damaged they were. "Seriously, Jirou, we were all worried," Kaminari added before, surprisingly, taking my hand. "I was worried," he added, stroking my hand. "What was he doing? Didn't he know I was with Izuku?" I quickly removed my hand gently before asking more questions. "How long was I out for?" I asked. "Not very long. The attack happened yesterday, and your parents are on their way now," he replied, seemingly not noticing me removing my hand. "Great," I muttered, lying back down into the hospital bed. "They're gonna be worried as hell." Anyway, what's your story? I questioned. Why were you sleeping on my bed? Kaminari grew bright red and looked away bashfully at my words. I was really worried after what happened and wanted to talk to you when you woke up, Kaminari squeaked out, clearly flustered. Thanks, Jaminye, I said with a smile, while he had his head down. It means a lot. Kaminari lit up at my words and beamed, like he'd waited years for those words. It does, he stammered, clearly touched by what I said. Yeah, I said, slightly confused. The Pikachu turned around, and I could swear I heard him mutter, "Here it goes," before turning back to me. Jirou, you know you mean a lot to me, right? Kaminari said, slightly shaking. I guess, I responded, slightly confused. Well, when I saw you that injured, something in me realized how dangerous what we do is. Kaminari continued. And I realize that there is a possibility that something could happen to you or me before I say what I want to say. Kaminari, I stuttered, slightly concerned at what my blonde-haired classmate was implying. So here goes nothing. Kaminari started, but couldn't seem to get the words out. Dimenit. Why is it so hard to say? He exclaimed. However, what he did next shocked me. Kaminari placed both of his hands on either side of my face and finally said what he wanted to. Jirou, I love you. My eyes widened at the confession, but before I had any time to process what was happening, Kaminari went a step further. He captured my lips with his and kissed me. I didn't know what was going on. My mind was racing, and my body felt frozen. Was this why Kaminari had been acting so differently? Suddenly, a loud noise interrupted us, and I spun towards it. What I saw shook me to my core. There, at the doorway, was Izuku Midoriya, my boyfriend, with tears streaming down his face. He looked devastated, like he had lost everything. Before I could finish, he ran out the door, leaving a broken pot of flowers on the floor. I scrambled out of bed, trying to catch him, but a searing pain in my ribs halted me. I fell to the floor, gazing at the spot where Izuku once stood and screamed, "Izujirou." I couldn't move. What had just happened shook me to my core. My boyfriend had just walked in on Kaminari kissing me and stormed out crying. I wanted to run after him to explain, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Jirou, are you okay? Kaminari asked, causing me to seethe with anger. I felt his arms around me as he helped me to my feet. Seriously though, are you okay? He started again, but was cut off by something hard. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling to the floor. You really have no shame, do you? I spat. You seem so worried over something you just caused. Jirou. You don't understand what just happened, do you? I snarled, making Kaminari shrink back. My mentally unstable boyfriend just saw you kiss me, and his mental state is going to go even further down the drain. But I thought that. Thought what? That I liked you despite having a boyfriend? I yelled, kicking him in the side. Let me make this clear, I don't like you. I have a boyfriend, and I care about him more than you could ever know. Kaminari's expression shattered before my eyes, but I didn't care. He had hurt the one I loved, and I had no forgiveness for him. Get out, I whispered, tilting my head downwards. But out! I yelled, causing Kaminari to jump and flee the room. I inhaled deeply before limping out of my room. I needed to catch up to Izuku and explain everything before something bad happened. However, as I crossed through the doorway, I was met with several classmates. In front of me were Yamamoto, Todoroki, Shoji, Tokoyami, and Bakugo. Jirou? What are you doing? Out of bed? Yamamoto asked, concerned. It's Izu, I exclaimed in a panicked voice. He walked in on Kaminari kissing me. The hell? Bakugo yelled, while the others widened their eyes at my words. Why was Kaminari kissing you? Yamamoto questioned. You weren't cheating on Midoriya, were you? What? No. He thought I liked him or something. I exclaimed. Anyway, I need to get to him so I can explain everything. I tried to make my way past them, but Shoji blocked my path. You're in no position to leave the hospital, you need to rest, he said firmly. You don't understand, I need him. I insisted, before a hand was placed on my shoulder. I turned around, surprised to see Bakugo stepping forward. I'll go talk to Izuku, he said. I was shocked. I never would have thought in a million years that Bakugo would do something like this. Especially for Aizu. Fine. I relented. But if you harm a hair on his head. Yeah, the blonde dismissed while walking away. Come on, Jirou. Yamamo said, placing my arm over her shoulder. As I was guided back to my hospital bed, I could only pray. Aizu. Please be safe. Bakugo's POV. My breathing was uneasy. I was going to talk to the guy I'd bullied throughout my childhood, and I needed to find a way to approach him without causing a panic. What about Inko? I questioned internally. Had Izuku told her about everything I'd done? My mind went back to the day I did the unforgivable. I quickly blocked out the memory. Come on, focus. I scolded myself silently. I found myself getting closer to the dreaded apartment. I thought back to my childhood days when Izuku and I would play, meeting at the stairwell of his apartment. Those days, the stairwell felt warm and welcoming. Now it only felt cold and distant. I finally made my way up to his floor and walked towards the entrance to his apartment. My heart thumped in my chest. This was it. This was my penance. I stood in front of the door, its scratched surface making me feel tiny and insignificant. I hated the feeling it was giving me. I was supposed to be the strongest hero, yet here I was, scared of a piece of wood. I inhaled deeply before knocking on the door. To my surprise, it was unlocked. No, Izuku? I called out, hoping for an answer. When silence greeted me, I decided to enter. You here? I questioned, gazing at the apartment we had played in as kids. It seemed so comfortable then, but now it just felt. As I walked further into the living space, I peeked into Izuku's room. I expected it to be filled with All Might merchandise, but to my shock, it was a normal room. It hurt me that he had so clearly given up on heroes. All because of me. I left the room and made my way to the kitchen, where a piece of paper caught my eye. It was stained with tears, but still readable. My eyes widened as I scanned the paper. I quickly scurried out of the apartment, clawing at my pockets for my phone. I called my friend frantically, hoping she was still available. As I scrambled down the stairs, the letter floated to the floor, its words clear as day. The words were fresh in my mind. Dear Izuku. My son, my baby, I'm sorry. I wish I could take it anymore, but I can't. Every time I look at you, it reminds me of my failure as a mother. Ever since you asked me if you could be a hero, the guilt has been eating at me for my answer. I wish I could hold you and tell you what you want to hear, but I can't. The world's cruel. You will never be a hero. Every day at work, I'm ridiculed for having you. They say I should have given you up for adoption, left you on the streets to be someone else's problem. I wish I was strong like you, honey, but I'm not. I'm moving to America to be with your father. We'll send you money so that you can live independently. I just can't be around you anymore. It's suffocating. I love you, Izuku, but we just can't live together anymore. I'm sorry. I knew what this meant for Izuku. He had nothing left anymore. Come on, extra. I yelled while I heard my phone still dialing. Pick up the phone. My prayers appeared to be answered as I heard my friend's voice. Bakugo? What is it? Did you talk to Midoriya? She asked. No, we need to get to him now. I exclaimed, jumping out of the apartment. What? Why? I gasped for air as I ran towards the hospital. The nerd's in trouble. In O1's POV, Jirou was shaken. Momo had run into the room with wide eyes and explained what Bakugo had reported. What Jirou heard shook her to her core. How could Inko do this? Jirou thought, silently cursing the mother. I need to find him, Jirou stated, moving to get out of her bed. Wait, you still haven't recovered. Momo warned frantically. Doesn't matter, Jirou muttered, huffing at the pain of moving. And where do you think you're going? The two girls turned their heads to see Recovery Girl standing by the door with a serious look on her face. Recovery Girl. I have to leave, my friend is in trouble. Jirou exclaimed, trying to get out of bed. However, a gentle tap with her cane on Jirou's leg sent the girl back to her bed in pain. "You're not going anywhere, not until I do a checkup on you," Recovery Girl scolded. "Besides, your friend can surely wait," the elderly nurse added, earning a whine from Jirou. "You don't understand. Settle down, Missy, this'll only take a moment." After 40 minutes of Recovery Girl checking on her injuries and using her quirk to heal them, a tired Jirou was left in her hospital bed. Jirou was desperate to get out of the hospital bed, but she knew that the heroes defending the hospital would send her right back if she was seen. Looking out the window, her sensitive ears picked up something shocking from the TV in her room. Breaking news: at Aldera High School, a former student is standing atop the school building. The screen showed a zoomed-out shot of the roof, revealing a mysterious figure. One unmistakable feature terrified Jirou: green hair. Her eyes widened at the news, and she quickly turned to see Momo, Bakugo, Tokoyami, and Kirishima staring at her in horror. "We need to go now," Bakugo insisted, earning a frantic nod from Jirou. "But Jirou hasn't been checked out yet," Momo exclaimed, receiving a glare from Jirou. "I'm not wasting time here. Izu needs help," she said, wearily getting out of bed. "Well, we'll need another way out since the heroes are patrolling the hospital," Tokoyami noted. Jirou marched toward the window, staring down at the considerable distance to the ground. Falling would mean serious injury. "Jirou, you can't be serious," Kirishima nervously stated, watching the determined girl. "Do you have a better idea?" Jirou asked, not breaking her gaze from the ground. "Think, Jirou. Your ears are still recovering, and I doubt they could support your weight right now," Momo scolded, placing a hand on her shoulder. The room fell silent at Momo's words until Bakugo spoke up. "We can use Dark Shadow," he announced. The group looked at him in surprise. "His quirk can extend pretty far, and I'm pretty sure it can fly," he added. Momo pondered for a moment. "I suppose that would work," she said slowly. "Then what are we waiting for?" Jirou exclaimed, walking over to Tokoyami. The emo bird shrank a little under her fierce gaze. "I'm going first," she declared with determination. Composing himself, Tokoyami nodded and allowed Dark Shadow to exit his body. "Sorry about this, Jirou," the quirk said timidly while pushing its fingers together. Jirou smiled and petted Dark Shadow before opening the window and letting it wrap its arms around her. "Be careful," Momo warned as Jirou placed one foot on the windowsill. Jirou turned and nodded before stepping out, being slowly lowered by a nervous Dark Shadow. She held her breath as the ground approached. She was at a height where she wouldn't die but would likely break a few bones. "So bright," Dark Shadow muttered, causing worry to spring up in Jirou. It was a bright sunny day, and the light was clearly affecting the quirk. "Hold on just a little longer," Jirou reassured it, praying it wouldn't lose strength. However, Dark Shadow's grip began to slip, and Jirou fell from its arms. "Sheet!" Jirou exclaimed, quickly attaching her jacks to the side of the hospital. Pain shot through her ears as they bore her weight. She grabbed onto the nearest windowsill and released her jacks, halting the painful experience. "Guess my ears really haven't healed yet," she thought, hearing Momo's worried voice. "Jirou, are you okay?" her friend yelled. "I'm fine. I'm nearly down," Jirou yelled back, reassuring her. She looked down and judged the distance. It was still a steep drop, but she spotted a pipe leading down about 5 windows to her right. The only problem was the distance between the windows, which would require her to leap between gaps. "Here goes," Jirou muttered under her breath before leaping to the windowsill. To her surprise, she managed to grasp it, preventing her fall. It groaned under her weight but held. Slowly, she shifted across before leaping to the next window. Another success. Feeling confident, Jirou leaped to her second-to-last window, but this one was less forgiving. The windowsill snapped under her weight, leaving her dangling with one hand. Gritting her teeth in annoyance, Jirou looked at the windowsill to her right, which appeared just as fragile. She cursed under her breath and judged the distance to the pipe. It was a risk, but she was prepared. Swinging her other hand onto the windowsill, she inhaled deeply and leaped across to the pipe. Everything felt like it was in slow motion as she reached for it. Her hand touched something metal, and she grasped it tightly, swinging her body and hugging the pole like a koala. After what felt like an eternity, Jirou reached the floor and let out a sigh of relief. Hearing footsteps, she turned to see her friends running toward her. "Jirou, you okay?" Momo asked worried. Jirou slowly nodded, then a thought dawned on her. "Why didn't we just have you create some rope for us?" she questioned. The group exchanged looks before face-palming at the obvious solution, even Bakugo looking embarrassed that he hadn't thought of it. "Anyway, let's go, Jirou," Bakugo insisted, bringing her back to the task at hand. Jirou gasped and nodded before running towards the road, the group following her. She was determined to reach Izuku, no matter what it took. Jirou's POV. We sat on the train in silence. I was staring at my hands, Bakugo was looking out the window, Momo was watching me with concern, and Kirishima and Tokoyami were awkwardly glancing at us. Momo was the first to break the silence. "Jirou?" "Yeah," I responded, still focused on my hands. "I may be pushing a little, and if you're not comfortable with it, then you don't have to answer. Just spit it out, Momo." I snapped, making everyone jump in their seats. Momo looked hurt by my outburst but quickly adopted a serious expression. "I want you to tell us what happened to Midoriya." I narrowed my eyes and sighed. "It's not my place." "It doesn't matter," Momo interrupted. "If we're going to save him, we need to know his story." I glared at Momo, but she didn't flinch. "Tell them, Jirou," Bakugo stated, still looking out the window. I scrunched my face in confusion. "Why do you want them to know? His story incriminates you the most." Bakugo merely clenched his jaw and continued to gaze outside. I sighed and weighed my options. While I had no right to tell them, if the situation escalated and I wasn't there, someone else would need to talk him down. I ran my fingers through my hair, gripping my scalp, before sighing again. I sat back and looked out the window. It all started with a doctor's appointment. In O1's POV, we all knew the story of Izuku Midoriya, quirkless at Bardich and ridiculed by his classmates for a dream he could never accomplish. However, there was one small difference in this story about his origins. Katsuki Bakugo. Midoriya and Bakugo were as close as friends could be, spending every possible hour together. Bakugo admired Midoriya's analytical skills, while Midoriya admired Bakugo's determination. They were inseparable. However, one small thing changed their ordinary relationship. One night, Midoriya was watching a Western film with his mother when the love interest kissed the protagonist. "Ooh, close your eyes, Izuku," Inko warned with a smile, covering the young boy's eyes. "Leg kissing," Izuku exclaimed, seemingly disgusted by the romance. "Well, I suppose that'll be you someday, Izuku, so you might as well get used to it," Inko stated, removing her hand. However, Izuku looked at Inko, confused. "When I grow up, I'll kiss people?" he questioned. "Yes, you will," Inko exclaimed. "You'll have a lovely wife and give me lots of grandchildren." Izuku tilted his head. "Why a wife?" Inko looked at Izuku in confusion. What was that, Izuku?" I asked. "Why do I have to have a wife? Can't I have a husband?" Inko froze at the question. Izuku, do you not want a wife?" she asked, a little concerned about what her son was potentially saying. "No, I'm fine with having a wife, but I was wondering if I could have a husband as well?" Inko spent that night trying to explain to Izuku why he shouldn't have a husband and should only have a wife. However, Izuku never understood his mother. Why was it so bad to have a husband? Why couldn't he choose? He was fine with the idea of having a wife, but the idea of having a husband was equally appealing. As Izuku grew up, he found that his crushes were slightly different from his friends. All the boys cared about girls, gaining crushes on them. Izuku shared this but also couldn't help developing feelings for boys. However, he never told them about his crushes, not after what had happened last time he did. "Hey, Izuku. We're all talking about our crushes, and we realized we hadn't found out who yours was." Izuku smiled at his friends. "Okay. I have a crush on Daiki," Izuku proudly declared. However, his friends looked at him, confused. "But Daiki's a boy." "Yeah. But I really like him." One of the boys emerged from the group. "My dad says that boys who like other boys are freaks." The group turned to the boy, surprised. Does that mean Izuku's a freak? They questioned. The boy stared at Midoriya coldly. Yeah, he said. The group then pushed Midoriya to the ground and started yelling names at him. Freak. Weirdo. Loser. That day, Izuku learned that the world wasn't fair. However, the one friend that Midoriya had through it all was Bakugo. He admired Bakugo immensely, especially when he got his quirk. To Midoriya, Bakugo was everything he wanted to be. But when Izuku received the news from the quirk doctor, everything changed. Bakugo began to act differently and distanced himself from Midoriya. Izuku's heart ached every time he asked to play with Bakugo and was turned down. Eventually, Izuku saw Bakugo gang up on a boy with his friends and intervened before he could even think about it. Out of the way, Deku! Bakugo demanded, frightening the small Midoriya. And no, this isn't Eiichiro like Keikikaken, Midoriya rebutted. He's crying. Bakugo sneered at Midoriya, angered by the audacity of a quirkless person to stand in his way. Growling, then die, Deku! The blonde boy screamed, before launching himself towards the defenseless green boy. Ever since that day, Bakugo belittled and bullied Midoriya, constantly trying to put his former best friend in his place. As they reached their final year before one, Midoriya had come to understand why his heart felt strange around Bakugo. He loved him. No one remembered that Midoriya had a crush on a boy as a child. They were more focused on his humiliation as a quirkless person. Midoriya was timid and easily scared, but he still held out hope for both his hero career and for Bakugo to reciprocate his feelings. He was clinging to these two dreams by a thread. Midoriya wasn't sure if he could go on if those hopes shattered. However, on one fateful day, the inevitable happened. What's this, Deku? Midoriya looked up fearfully at the blonde bully who grasped his hero notebook. Please give it back, Kaken, Midoriya stuttered, timidly trying to reach for his book. However, Bakugo merely moved it out of his reach. Hero analysis for the future? Like writing in this book would help a useless Deku like you become a hero, Bakugo sneered, earning laughs from his friends. What a loser, one of them said. He really believes he can be a hero? Midoriya shrank at their words, staring anxiously at Bakugo. Okay guys, why you had your fun now, Midoriya stammered, standing up to get his book. However, Bakugo shoved him back into his seat. No, I want to see what a loser like you has written, Bakugo revealed with an evil smirk. Midoriya's eyes widened as he quickly tried to defer Bakugo. Wait. You don't want to look in there. It's useless. Midoriya lied, trying to persuade Bakugo. However, Bakugo ignored him, beginning to flick through the pages. At least the drawings aren't total garbage, one of Bakugo's friends commented. However, there was one page that made the group stop, Katsuki Bakugo's page. The bullies burst out laughing. Holy cow, Bakugo, one of them exclaimed. He's got one of you. Bakugo remained quiet and frozen. What's the matter, Bakugo? One of the lackeys questioned before following his gaze. On the page, in tiny handwriting, was a little note. If only you knew how I felt about you. Whoa, one of the bullies exclaimed. You're gay? The other one finished. Bakugo stood there, staring at Midoriya with wide eyes. Midoriya's heart raced. He couldn't breathe. All he could focus on were the disgusted faces of the bullies. Well, Bakugo, one of the bullies questioned mockingly. You gonna give Deku his answer? Bakugo stared into Midoriya's terrified eyes, looked back at his friends, then leaned close to Midoriya. Bakugo didn't mean what he said next. He didn't hate Midoriya for having a crush on him. However, his friends were eager to watch him destroy the nerd, and the power went to his head. I'd never love a useless, quirkless Deku like you. At that moment, Midoriya's heart broke. He knew Bakugo would never reciprocate his feelings, but the bully's words reinforced everything he had tried to ignore. He felt useless, convinced he could never become a hero. But worst of all, he believed he could never have Bakugo. Midoriya pushed past Bakugo and his friends and ran off, tears welling up in his eyes. The bullies laughed at the heartbroken teen, but Bakugo merely stared at the spot where the green-haired boy once sat. He regretted what he said. He didn't love Midoriya, but he never wanted to hurt him like that. Midoriya stood on the roof, crying and breathing. He didn't know why he even tried anymore. He felt he would never be a hero, never be useful, never be. But he stared at the fence blocking off the ledge of the roof. It was barely a fence, with the poor school budget making it easily climbable. Midoriya took off his blazer and began to climb. What was the point anymore? His life's dream felt like an impossible fantasy, and the person he loved despised him. He reached the other side and stared down at the drop. He used to be afraid of heights, but the drop almost seemed inviting. Midoriya closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. Then he took a step forward and fell. He could hear screaming, a gruff voice yelling his name, but he didn't care. The wind whipping across his face was relieving. However, the exhilarating experience was over before it could reach its climax. A certain red-feathered hero caught him, saving him from the fall. Midoriya had fallen unconscious once caught, and the next thing he knew, he was in the hospital. That day, his life took a turn for the worse. He now had voices plaguing his every movement, thought, and action. The people at school treated him poorly, and his therapy sessions drained his mother's savings. Every time he went, the therapist would say everything he wanted to hear: "You're not useless. You are valid. You can be a hero." The therapist helped Midoriya believe in himself, even enough to start wearing clothes that represented his identity. So he enrolled to go to UA. However, before he even entered the gate, he was slammed into the wall. "What are you doing here?" Katsuki Bakugo confronted him. Ever since Midoriya got out of the hospital, Bakugo hadn't said a word to him. He was afraid to say anything. He never wanted Midoriya dead, only for him to realize his place below himself. I can be a hero, Keikaken." Midoriya stammered. "You're wrong." Bakugo's eyes turned red at Midoriya's words. Clearly, jumping off the building hadn't stopped Midoriya's delusions. Did he think he was better than Bakugo? Bakugo snarled and began to speak. "A quirkless loser like you could never be a hero. You'd fail the exam and be cleaned up like trash." Midoriya's eyes started to water. He clasped his ears shut and shook his head, mumbling. Bakugo, still filled with rage, left him with one final word. "You'll never be a hero, Deku." Shortly after, Bakugo walked away, and they both entered the exam. Midoriya tried his hardest, prying the metal off, pulling at it, punching it, but it was all for nothing. By the end, he was left on his knees, with bloody fingernails and a battered body. He fell unconscious on the floor while everyone walked around him, not one person trying to help. When Midoriya woke up, he felt as though he was at his lowest, ready to give up. However, one line from a certain injured purple-haired examinee gave him hope. "You okay, Greenie?" "And that's how we met," Jirou finished. The group sat in deafening silence. Bakugo was gritting his teeth, Momo was crying, Kirishima was staring at Bakugo in shock, and Tokoyami had his head in his hands. "Well, there you have it," Jirou stated while looking out the window. "That's the story of Izuku Midoriya." The group stood in front of the school, desperately pushing past the swarms of onlookers. "What are all these people doing here?" Bakugo questioned while pushing obstacles aside. Eventually, they reached the end of the crowd, only to be stopped by a different kind of barrier. "Stop. This is a police-controlled situation," a policeman ordered, blocking them with yellow tape. "Let us through," Jirou exclaimed. "That's my boyfriend up there." The policeman grimaced. "I'm sorry, but only authorized personnel can pass through." "Sheet. What now?" Bakugo exclaimed. The group stayed quiet until Kirishima spoke up. "I'll distract them, and you guys sneak past." The group's mouths dropped. "Kirishima," Jirou murmured, nodding in gratitude. "I'll join you," Tokoyami added, further shocking the group. "Are you sure?" Kirishima questioned. Tokoyami merely nodded, and his dark shadow gave a thumbs up. The two quickly dodged under the yellow tape and started yelling, attracting attention. "Over here! There's a villain!" Kirishima cried out, causing the police to chase after them. "Okay, let's go," Jirou announced, ducking under the tape and sneaking over to the building with Bakugo and Momo. They snuck around the large police van and the officers before reaching the entrance to the school. However, before they could enter, a shout was heard. "Hey! You can't go in there!" The trio turned to see a handful of policemen running toward them. "Sheet!" Jirou exclaimed. Before either Bakugo or Jirou could react, Momo pushed both of them inside and locked the doors with a key she created. "What are you doing?" Jirou exclaimed, banging on the door. "I'll buy you some time," Momo exclaimed while removing some of her clothes to create more protection for the door. Jirou grimaced, looking Momo in the eye. "Thank you, Momo," she said, before being yanked further into the building by Bakugo. "Come on, we don't have much time," he exclaimed as they ran up the building. Izuku stood on the rooftop, the wind rippling against his body. He couldn't even hear the yelling from below. Was it that he couldn't notice it, or did he simply not care anymore? All he had was music and Kyo, and now. A tear dripped down his cheek. Why was he crying? He always knew something would happen, that his peace would never last, that he could never be truly happy. His eyes scanned the skyline, its orange glow illuminating his lonely rooftop. "It's time," he stated. He removed his shoes and placed his note inside. It contained apologies and forgiveness, but if he was honest, he didn't really mean any of it. He was just tired, so very tired. This was the second time he was up here with this intention, except this time there was no hero to catch him. I climbed over the fence and stood at the edge. I could hear the voice becoming louder. "Do it. It'll be over soon." The tone was no longer harsh, it felt soothing. I closed my eyes as the voices engulfed me, preparing to take my final step. "Izuku!" I retracted my foot and slowly turned around to the voice. "Kyo!" Jirou's POV. The sight almost made me sick. I was almost too late, but the worst part was his face. He looked so peaceful, as if this was all he ever wanted. "A step away from the ledge." I stammered, choosing my words carefully. "What are you doing here?" Aizu questioned, his voice steady. My breath hitched at his question. "Why wouldn't I be here?" I asked, slightly scared. "You're trying to hurt yourself." Aizu merely tilted his head, clearly confused. "But you should be with your boyfriend," he responded. I shook at his words. "Kaminari isn't my boyfriend. This is a big misunderstanding. Don't lie to me." I flinched at Aizu's angry yell. He inhaled deeply before exhaling. "Don't, but to me," he stated quietly. "I'm not," I stammered, terrified. He stared into my eyes, narrowing his gaze as it pierced through me. I knew he could tell I was telling the truth, but his state probably made him refuse to believe it. After a minute of silence, I spoke up. Please don't jump." I begged. "Why?" He replied. "I have absolutely nothing left." "You have me." I quickly responded. He merely looked down and shook his head. "No, I don't think I ever did." A tear dropped down my cheek as he said that. He turned around and my eyes widened. "No. Please don't." I begged. He ignored me and moved his foot forward. I couldn't do anything, my body froze. My ears rang as the situation unfolded in slow motion until... "Izuku!" Aizu froze and spun around. We both recognized the voice, and I was internally cursing him for not listening to me. Aizu's eyes were wide, but his face was filled with anger. "What are you doing here?" he spat. Behind me was Katsuki Bakugo, trembling at the entrance to the roof. "Oh no." Bakugo's POV. "Stay here." My eyes widened at Irza's command. "Like hell I am," I growled as I stepped forward. "If he sees you, he'll jump," she coldly stated. "If you think I came all this way just to stand and do nothing, then I'd be completely right." Irz cut me off. "You're not going." End of story. I opened my mouth to argue, but her glare shut me down immediately. I looked down at the floor, frustration evident on my face. Jirou then opened the door and left me at the entrance. "Sheet!" I cursed as I hit the wall. I leaned against it, sinking down while holding my head. What was I supposed to do? This was all my fault and I wanted to fix it. I wanted to be a hero, like All Might, always winning. But how could I be a hero if I let this hang over me for the rest of my life without making amends? I shook my head and stood up. I wasn't going to stay here. I wasn't going to let my past define me. I wasn't going to let Izuku die. No, please don't do it. I twisted my head at the noise coming from the roof and ran through the door. It all happened before I even had a chance to think. Before me was Izuku on the other side of the fence, ready to jump. Ears was standing there frozen, staring at her boyfriend. Izuku! I yelled, stopping him just as he was about to fall. My fists were trembling, but I stood strong. I was going to save him. For once in my life, I was going to be a hero. In One's POV, the rooftop was silent, the wind's whispers being the only noise. Jirou was staring at Bakugo with fear, scared for her lover. Bakugo was trembling under Midoriya's intense gaze, struggling to breathe under the pressure of the situation. What are you doing here? Midoriya snarled. Bakugo inhaled deeply before looking up at him. I'm sorry. No. Midoriya yelled in anger, gripping the fence tightly. You don't get to apologize. You never get to apologize. Midoriya spat as Bakugo shrank under his fierce gaze. Why the hell are you even here? To persuade me that you've changed? To have a moment of redemption for everything you've done to me? The rooftop returned to silence as Bakugo took in everything Midoriya had screamed at him. You're right. Jirou and Midoriya looked at Bakugo in bewilderment. No apology could ever make up for what I've done to you, and I should know that. Bakugo stated, looking down. There was silence for a moment until he spoke again. But that doesn't mean you should throw your life away. Midoriya's eyes widened at his former bully's words. What I've done to you is unforgivable, and I only realized it a couple of days ago. But you still have people that care about you. Midoriya frantically shook his head, trying to refute Bakugo's statement, but Bakugo continued. Your mom, your dad, even people from our class helped us get here, all for you. Bakugo insisted. And Ears is right here, and we both know that if she didn't love you, she wouldn't be. Midoriya now placed his hands over his ears, trying to block out the noise. It's true. Jirou finally spoke up and stepped forward. I love you, Aizu, and I can't imagine life without you. No. Stay back. Midoriya screamed, shaking his head. What Inko did to you is unforgivable, and I know that life must be bleak for you right now, Jirou continued, ignoring Midoriya's words. But you still have me. Midoriya was crying, holding his face in his hands as Jirou reached the fence. It's just so hard, he whimpered, his eyes squeezed shut as tears trickled down his face. I know, Jirou said, placing her hand on the fence. Why do I have to go on? Why can't it just end? Jirou smiled gently and caressed his cheek with her earphone jack through the fence. Midoriya sniffled and leaned into the touch. After a moment of silence, he nodded and stood up. He looked at Jirou and placed his hand on hers through the fence before beginning to climb over. Bakugo let out a sigh of relief, and cheers erupted from below. Jirou felt tears of happiness brimming in her eyes, relieved that her lover had come back. If life were a fairy tale, Midoriya would safely climb over, and everything would be fine. However, life is not a fairy tale. Time seemed to slow for Jirou as she watched the green-haired boy's grip on the fence slip, and he fell back, screaming. Jirou extended her jack, praying that it would reach him in time. But her jacks were tired and worn from the earlier fight and escape from the hospital. They screamed in agony as they extended, failing to catch the falling boy. Jirou screamed in horror. Bakugo ran over, tears streaming down his face. They heard the gasps from the crowd below as Midoriya's body fell. Izuku! Jirou cried out. The world went silent as she slowly realized what had just happened. She fell to her knees, sobbing violently while clinging to the fence. No, she muttered, tears pouring down her face. She couldn't believe it, he was gone. The world around her faded, leaving only her own sobs. What was she supposed to do now? Go back to school and pretend nothing happened? Return to being a hero, knowing she had failed to save the one person who meant the most to her? This couldn't be real. Jirou slowly raised her head and saw Bakugo staring at the spot where Izuku once stood. She glared at him. You, she spat, her voice filled with anger. Bakugo looked back at her, broken. I told you to stay inside. I knew what would happen if you. He couldn't finish, breaking into sobs himself. Bakugo clenched his fists, feeling he had failed. This was his chance at redemption, to prove he could be a hero and make amends for his past. Jirou was right, he should have never tried to help. They remained silent, grappling with the weight of what had just occurred. Suddenly, a ringing broke the silence. Jirou pulled out her phone and saw Momo was calling. Wiping her tears, she shakily answered. Jirou. Izuku is. I know, Jirou interrupted, sobbing. No. Breathe, come look. Momo urged. Jirou gasped, hope reigniting within her. She dropped her phone and quickly climbed over the fence. I. Bakugo warned, worried about what Jirou was doing. But she ignored him and reached the other side. Bakugo watched with fear, praying she wouldn't fall too. What happened next shocked him. Oh my god. Yes. Jirou screamed, relief flooding her face. She spun around to Bakugo. Come quick. Are you insane? Bakugo questioned. Just shut up and get over here. Jirou urged. Bakugo shakily climbed the fence and joined her, his expression shifting to one of relief as he looked down. There, on the ground, was a massive safety net with Izuku's unconscious body being carried off it. Momo lay nearby, breathing. Jirou smiled at her before turning to Bakugo. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Bakugo's eyes widened in surprise, tears of relief replacing his earlier sorrow. He had done it. Chapter end. Jirou sat next to the bed of her boyfriend, holding his hand while his mind remained adrift. She had never been more scared in her life. The thought of life without Midoriya was haunting. She was in the hospital, finally allowed to see him after his checkup. According to the doctors, he was fine, just underfed and exhausted. Jirou wondered how Midoriya would react when he woke. Would he be relieved? Upset? Angry? She knew he had been persuaded not to jump, and that his fall was an accident. But that didn't mean he had given up on his struggles. He had lost so much and felt he had little left. Her thoughts were interrupted by a squeeze on her hand. She looked up to see Midoriya stirring, awakening from his slumber. His eyes flickered open and shifted around the room. Aizu. Jirou breathed, relieved that he'd woken. The green-haired boy's eyes targeted Jirou, and he slowly shifted, trying to sit up. Easy, Jirou warned. You're malnourished and tired, don't push yourself. Midoriya ignored her and sat up. Kyo, he muttered, his eyes settling on her. Jirou could feel tears brimming in her eyes. She'd waited so long to hear that name escape his lips. I'm so sorry, the purple-haired girl whispered. Midoriya's eyebrows furrowed with confusion before realizing what she was apologizing for. She was apologizing for everything he had been through, that his mother left, that Kaminari kissed her, and that she couldn't save him. Midoriya frantically shook his head, ignoring the headache he gained from doing so. You have nothing to apologize for, he croaked out. None of this is your fault. If anything, it's mine. If I'd tried harder with my mom, if I hadn't jumped to conclusions at the hospital, if I hadn't gone to the roof of that school. He was cut off by Jirou flinging herself on him, crying into his shoulder. Don't say it, Jirou whispered. Please don't say it. Midoriya began to tear up as well and shakily nodded. After a couple of minutes, the couple detached and awkwardly returned to their original places. So, Jirou began. Where does this leave us? Midoriya's eyes softened as he met Jirou's desperate gaze. Kyo, he breathed out. I know you're so broken over everything that's happened, but I will never stop loving you. Jirou interrupted, the very thought of life without you is unbearable, and I don't want to let you go. So please, don't leave me. Midoriya squeezed Jirou's hand, making her raise her head. I feel the same, he stated. I'd be lost without you, and I'm never going to let you go again. Jirou's eyes swam with tears as she stared into Midoriya's emerald eyes. The two slowly moved towards each other, their lips inching closer. The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. Jirou and Midoriya immediately sprang back into their respective places. See, come in, Midoriya stuttered, his face flushed. The door opened to reveal Bakugo, awkwardly entering the room. "Hey!" Bakugo stated under Midoriya's gaze. "Hey!" Midoriya replied more firmly. There was no aggression in his voice, just a plain word being said. Bakugo gulped under the pressure of the room before dropping to the floor and bowing. Forgive me!" Bakugo exclaimed, his voice shaking. "I've done the unforgivable to you, and I'm so disgusted in myself that my very reflection makes me want to empty my guts." He continued, Midoriya merely staring at him. "I've got no right to call myself a hero if I don't own up to my past mistakes, no right to be a hero if I don't seek to redeem myself for the pain I put you through." Midoriya continued to stare. "I'm so sorry." Tears were now in Bakugo's eyes. "I was so blinded by my friend's praise that I forgot what a hero really was, what a hero should really do. I know I've got no right to ask for this after everything I put you through, but I'm so sorry for everything that I've done, and I beg you to forgive me." The silence that encompassed the room was deafening. Jirou and Midoriya stared at Bakugo with wide eyes, shocked at how deeply the once cocky boy had changed. "I don't think I could ever forgive you, Bakugo," Midoriya finally spoke. "But I think I'm willing to start over. With you." Bakugo began to sob and looked up at Midoriya in disbelief. He had come here expecting to be thrown out as a disgrace but was instead offered a chance to start anew. The moment was interrupted by another knock on the door. Bakugo stood up, wiping his face with his sleeve, and opened it to see a certain black-haired teacher standing there with an irritated look on his face. "Bakugo," Aizawa greeted before entering the room. "My name is Shota Aizawa, Pro Hero Eraserhead. I'm Bakugo and Jirou's teacher, and I think we all need an overdue chat." Midoriya looked around confused, while Jirou and Bakugo swallowed nervously. "Please explain to me why I got a message saying that 5 students had escaped the hospital, and then an hour later I see you two talking this young man off a ledge on live television?" Aizawa growled, his eyes glowing red. "Well," Jirou began. Aizawa patiently listened as the group explained what had happened and what led up to Midoriya's crisis. The teacher remained silent for a handful of seconds before turning to Bakugo. "Give me one good reason not to expel you," Aizawa growled, his eyes still red. Mr. Eraserhead, sir." "Please don't expel Bakugo," Midoriya pleaded, earning gasps from Bakugo and Jirou. "Kid, you're really going to defend him?" Aizawa stated in disbelief. "Bakugo's done some unforgivable things, but he stopped me from jumping." Jirou squeezed his hand at the word, jumping, clearly unnerved, but Midoriya continued. "He's proven to be an actual hero and is willing to change. If you were to expel him, you'd be robbing the world of a great potential hero, and I wouldn't be able to live with that." Aizawa narrowed his eyes as he stared at Midoriya for an uncomfortable amount of time. "Fine," Aizawa sighed. "But I'm going to go back through your old school records, and if I don't like what I find, you're gone." Bakugo nodded, accepting Aizawa's compromise. "You'll also be attending therapy at UA," Aizawa stated before getting up to leave. "This young man has set up high expectations for you. Don't let him down." The 3 students stared at the door, processing what had just happened. "Thank you," Bakugo whispered, his gratitude evident. "It's what heroes do," Midoriya replied with a smile. "My parents are waiting downstairs for me. I should probably get going," Bakugo said. "Hey Boom Boy," Jirou called out, stopping Bakugo at the door. "Thank you." Bakugo nodded in response and left. Shortly after, Jirou crawled into Midoriya's bed and snuggled up next to him. "How are you feeling?" she asked, resting her head on his chest. "Tired," Midoriya simply answered, closing his eyes. "Yeah, me too." They slept through the whole day after that. It had been 5 years since Midoriya's attempted suicide, and a lot had changed. Jirou graduated from UA with flying colors, even surpassing Bakugo in multiple areas thanks to Midoriya's advice. Bakugo had transformed after the incident, becoming more respectful to his teachers and helping others without his usual outbursts. Kirishima struggled for a while to reconcile Bakugo's past actions, but eventually accepted that his friend had changed. When Kaminari learned of the impact his actions had on Midoriya, he apologized profusely. The whole class collectively reprimanded him, but Kaminari graduated with the rest of them. Although Jirou forgave him, their relationship was never quite the same. Midoriya held no ill will toward Kaminari, but their interactions remained awkward, and they tended to avoid each other. Midoriya underwent extensive therapy and moved in with Jirou, as his mother never returned. He graduated with perfect grades and became a teacher, earning respect from his students. With Jirou's help, he started a charity for the quirkless, which was a resounding success, with everyone from Class 1A assisting in its setup. After graduating, Jirou and Midoriya moved in together and fell even deeper in love. They created music together, and Jirou eventually opened up about her insecurities, which Midoriya supported her through. In the end, everything was well. Today was the day. That's what Midoriya kept telling himself as he quietly got out of bed early. He had everything planned out. First, he would cook Jirou's favorite breakfast and let her enjoy it in bed. Then, the radio would play her new single when she got up to get ready for work. After she returned home, he would take her to a restaurant by the beach, followed by a walk on the beach where he would pop the question at sunset, just like she had confessed to him at sunrise. It would be perfect. Come back to bed, Jirou whined. Midoriya turned around and pecked her cheek, earning a smile from her. Just sleep for now, he reassured her, contenting the sleepy hero for the moment. He rushed into the kitchen to make pancakes, knowing they were her favorite. He also brewed coffee, knowing she would appreciate it. Once everything was ready, he placed the tray on her lap as she stirred from the delicious aroma. "What's the occasion?" she asked, her eyes lighting up at the sight of breakfast. "You'll see," he replied with a smile. They spent the morning sharing the meal before getting up. As Jirou began to put on her work clothes, he turned on the radio. "Turn it off, babe. You know I hate the pop CRP they put on," Jirou complained. However, her tune changed when the radio announced, "And now we have the latest hit from Earphone Jack's new album, Violet." Jirou's face lit up at the mention of her music, making Midoriya feel warm inside. "Babe, they're playing my music," she exclaimed, her excitement infectious. "I know," he replied, trying to hide his role in the surprise. After lingering longer than she should have, Jirou left with a wide smile, slightly worried about being late but reassured by Midoriya's plan. At her work, we had coordinated some small surprises to make her day even better, aiming to create the best day of her life. When Jirou returned, her smile had somehow grown even bigger. "Babe, you have no idea what happened at work today," she exclaimed excitedly. "What happened?" I asked, unable to hide my smile. "So much. The interns held a little appreciation presentation for me. We got a new coffee machine that I don't remember ordering, my manager gave me all the fun assignments, and..." Jirou paused to catch her breath before continuing. "I adored watching her ramble. Honestly, today's just been amazing so far." "Well, it's about to get better. Get changed," I replied, gently removing some of her hero accessories. Jirou raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "Why?" she asked as I guided her toward the bedroom. "Because we're going to the restaurant by Dagoba Beach." "What? Why?" "You'll see." When Jirou emerged from the bedroom 5 minutes later, she looked stunning. My jaw dropped at how gorgeous she was. Jirou chuckled at my reaction and playfully pushed my jaw closed. "Don't want any flies going in there, do we?" I blushed and tried to compose myself. "Why you look be appealing," I stammered. Jirou blushed but giggled at my comment, making my heart race. "You don't look too shabby yourself," she replied, looking me up and down. "Thanks," I said, feeling shy from the compliment. "Well, Greenie? I thought we had a restaurant to go to." "Oh, right." The restaurant was fairly empty, and we had a secluded spot by the window overlooking the ocean. Throughout dinner, we exchanged glances filled with adoration, making me realize that this was the person I wanted to spend my life with. After we finished our meals, Jirou had her favorite. I took her hand. "Want to take a walk?" By now, the sky was an appealing orange, reflecting its rays on the glittering sand. Jirou took off her heels as we walked along the beach. "This has been the best day ever," she whispered. "It's about to get better," I replied with a smile that I knew she loved. When we reached the perfect spot, I turned to her. "Do you remember the day you finished cleaning this beach?" Jirou looked confused at first, then smiled. Of course, it was the day I first kissed you. I smiled and cupped her cheeks. That was the moment my life became worth living. You shone so bright that any dark thought I had disappeared. Jirou's eyes glistened with tears. You're without a doubt the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I know you're the one I want to spend my life with. Her eyes widened at my words. Izu, she murmured, moving her hands toward her lips. I lowered myself to one knee and looked up at her. Jirou, I love you more than words can describe. I heard her gasp, tears of joy in her eyes. Will you marry me? Jirou leapt into my arms, kissing me with pure passion and love. As we lay on the sandy beach, she looked down at me. Izuka Midoriya, I will marry you. The end.